We finally brute forced the community into a loop where we were like, oh, I don't know about this change. Here's actionable feedback. And then here's the community saying, yeah, that actionable feedback will be good. And then they gave us the feedback. Don't veer off of the loop by just complaining and whining about everything. Stay in the loop. Stay in the loop, fam. If there's something that needs to be changed, let's just talk about it like adults. You know what I mean? Like, we finally got the loop connected. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast, the show dedicated to talk about all the progress things in life, like music, content creation, and video games. I am one of your co-hosts, Jesse Kazam, and today is the best day in Tarkov history. And you are?
And I'm happy.
Hey! Oh. Veritas is happy. Oh my God, this is the best day ever.
Dude, I mean...
There's so much to talk about. There's so much happened in the last week. Let's start with your video first before we start talking about like the changes, because once we start talking about the changes, we're never even going to stop. We talked last week about you like wanting to make the video and like you were considering about making a video. Last week on the podcast, you talked about the 20-page intro that you were like, I scrapped it and I don't even know if I'm going to do the video. A few days ago, you published the video, so you were just like, F it, I'm just gonna get this out shorter. Like you had even mentioned the video, it's shorter than you thought. Than you normally, like you scrapped some pages. You were just like, I'm just gonna get this out.
Dude, you know what the craziest thing is? It's the video I'm least proud of. I hate it.
Dude, I that's why I wanted to spend like 5 minutes talking about this, because I think, and I don't know if you've been able to like retroactively dissect this at all, but like as a watcher of all your videos, this one impacted me more as well. And I knew that, and I could tell in like your voice and in the script that you were like kind of just like whatever.
It's not even that so much as when you write. I had a 58 pages or something, I think, maybe 38. I don't know. A lot of script.
Yeah. And
I kept I was struggling to figure out how I wanted to tell this story and make my case.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of the video was not to say, here's what needs to be done.
Yeah.
It was saying, can we all agree something is wrong?
Yeah.
And as long as we can all agree something is wrong, then now we can have a discussion.
Yeah.
And but in writing it and changing it and editing it and moving it around and getting frustrated, deleting it, moving it, it wasn't as coherent as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Half of the clips were not the clips I like wanted. I just couldn't find them in time. I gave up. Like it was in so many ways the worst video I've ever made.
Yeah.
And it just had a montage at the end that put everybody in the feels.
Well, and not only that, I think that's true. That it really did. That really did. But I think on some level, we're never going to be able to quantify how much any of these things are. On some level, it was the right timing. I think you know what I mean? I think like similar to we've talked about on the podcast before about how you would bring up things like the netcode. And I was so honeymoon phase with the game where I was like, it's not that bad. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even notice it. You know what I mean? So I think there's an emotional timing that this video hit, even though you were like, this is basically my Tarkov's not supposed to be fun video I made a year ago. You know what I mean? I think there's an emotional timing for the community that rung a bell.
They were at the bottom.
Yes. Additionally, I think the main points you wanted to make in the video, you stuck the landing on those so well that if some of the other clips weren't fine, or if it was a little uncohesive on other places, you stuck the landing on the main points of the video so well. Like the Call of Duty montage was so good, because that's such an affront to like the gamer mentality. COD bad. Really, it's period. COD bad. It's not even, it used to be COD bad, Tarkov good, but now everyone hates Tarkov. It's COD bad, Tarkov bad. Just don't be like COD. And kind of underneath all of our noses, COD went like swoop and ended up with, like we talked about before, as good, if not better, weapon handling animations, as good, if not, and then it got better movement, better this, better that. And so like that montage was so good on the, like, you know, as long as it's not COD movement. And the clip where you're like trying to jump up on the fence and then you ditch your backpack and you wait for stamina and you try and jump up on the fence and you try and jump up on the fence. And then you cut to a clip where you're dude running in COD and you just mantle over something. You just put your hand down, you slide right over it. And it was like you get the stank face. You're like, oh, the visual was so good. So like that point really landed. The whole like take yourself out of this COD or not COD. It's like just give us good movement. And I think so when I commented on your tweet, I retweeted it, I did a bunch of the stuff and I said it, but I want to say it again because I saw so many people, and I'm in this category, which is why I don't mind calling these people out. Up until 3 days ago, I was literally in the category where people, when they talked about old Tarkov, I was the one that said rose-colored glasses, bud. Like, rose-colored glasses, bud. And I think what you did really well is you brought it into, like, early in the video, you said, like, I don't just want old Tarkov. You know what I mean? Like, I don't just want to, like, delete all the progress that was made. It's, can we address that there are aspects of old Tarkov that would fit really nicely in the new Tarkov to make a better Tarkov.
It's we've lost an essence that on top of the new game
would be so good, would fit so good. And I saw guys that I normally align with a lot of our thinking. Hayes, Dan Exert, a lot of the guys, well, I like the tactical, I like the slow, I was all for the weight system, I was all for inertia, I was all for these things. And I saw them all say the same thing, including me, which was like, holy cow, that was me. I said everybody looked at it through rose-colored glasses. You changed my mind. Willers said the same thing too. Willers was like, his tweet was like, you've convinced me, bring back old Tarkov, baby.
He was the first person to come in, and I was like, I had a lot of people agreeing with me. He was the first person that like I had a ton of respect for.
Yeah.
That was like, before the video was out, he was watching me edit it, and he's like, I mean, honestly, like the movement's okay. Like I'm not, it's not really that big of a deal. And I was like, I felt a little deflated.
Yeah.
And then he watched it and it was like, nah, dog, you sold me. I was like,
oh, you're like, yes.
It would have been better. It's better than if he said, I agree with you before and I agree with you after. That I changed his mind.
Yeah, because what you never get to do in Twitch chat is collect all of the thoughts and put it together. You know what I mean? And so I'd watched it in its entirety multiple times. My jaw was on the floor. The amount of times that those clips, it was such a good visual and auditory video. Like I said, maybe you didn't get all the clips exactly how you wanted, but it was so visually engaging if you play Tarkov a lot. And I think a lot of the haters of the video, and this is like a real statement. Like I was
all four of them.
Yeah, I was gonna tweet. Well, haters of the changes. A lot. Okay, so I was gonna tweet this early, and I probably will later. If you're saying right now that now it's just like old Tarkov and everybody's bunny hopping around and every gun's a laser beam, what you're doing is you're showing the rest of us that you didn't play Tarkov back then. Because what we have today is not like that. It's what we wanted all along, which was something in the middle. And so like the people that are struggling with some of these changes or the people that were struggling with your video clearly didn't play back then. But like my jaw was on the floor because I was presented with my own, like, you know, I was always defending it. Like, oh, no, rose-colored glasses. That was all those things were broken back then. The stutters, the guns were too laser beamy. But the amount of times, and it was like you did it for me, Veritas, the amount of times you made your stamina bar so big, and like you'd have 50% of your stamina, you get shot once and you're in the red. Well, then you get up from your crouch, you're in the red. You're this, and then those old clips, bro. You're like, those old, even when you didn't have the stamina bar big, I'm looking down in the bottom left hand of the corner, and you're like, pow, pow, arm, leg, arm, stomach, arm, leg, and your stamina's just super gradually going down. And my jaw hit my desk when I saw that, because like I was finally confronted with, like, I was emotionally defending all these changes, being like, oh, old Tarkov, rose-colored glasses, but simultaneously, daily, daily mauling about not being able to move or maneuver in this game. And I think that was really what made it click for me, was like, oh, there were parts of old Tarkov that were just so much better. And we don't have to go all the way back, but we can bring these things. Cause that's what you allowed me visually to arrive at your point without you having to say it. And then you said it, and that drove it home. And through the clips, you allowed me to arrive at, oh, but today's Tarkov with that movement would be so good. When I was watching those clips, and then you were like, yeah, this is what we want. We want today's Tarkov with this. And then I was like, I was so sold. I was so convinced. It was so good. So
yeah,
bravo on the video, man. Like, I know, and I knew before this podcast that you were going to be like, I'm not super proud of that video. Like, you're proud of what the video did, obviously, but I knew, we've talked so much about YouTube. I've seen so many of your videos. I knew that wasn't a like proper Veritas exports that and goes, my magnum opus like this. I loved it. I knew it.
Yeah.
But it was so good.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like one of the things I've talked about for a long time too, is like I actually kind of learned this from Carl Jobst, where he basically said like, the best work isn't the most successful work.
Yeah.
He's like doing 80% of what you want and 20% what you definitely don't want usually is like is like the maximize, you know, like a clickbaity title and a thumbnail, but like a good, you know, like just things like that. I got a perspective on this that I've never had before. I learned so much, and I don't think we have time for it today, but maybe we'll talk about it like next time or something. I streamed 14 hours that first day the video came out.
Okay.
And then after that, I went and I watched 4 VODs of 4 different streamers watching the video and reacting. And paid attention to what people in chat were saying and what the streamers were saying and how they were reacting to it.
Yeah.
Because it's an opportunity, very much like when you kill another streamer, you get to see 2 perspectives.
Yeah.
It was the opportunity to see how are people consuming my content.
Yeah.
And there was so much that was kind of mind-blowing.
I believe that.
In all, and after that day, I think I probably watched 7 or 8 full watch-throughs of people reacting, and you'd be surprised how many moments. There were a couple moments where I really wanted to like drop the hammer.
Yeah.
And actually I think I failed a little bit, because that's when they would all start talking or commenting.
Oh, interesting.
Or the people in chat all are the same. They would all say the same kinds of things.
You learn a lot about the pacing of your video from a consumer's perspective. The same thing happened to me. My one claim to fame is when I made a video on inertia. I had taken a bunch of footage days before the patch 12.12 when they added inertia, like very specific, stand here, run to here, have this much weight on. I had a bunch of before. They added inertia. I did a bunch after, and I did like a comparison video. And Summit watched it. And chat was like, yo, Summit, watch your video. So like I went and watched his VOD, and I was cringing the entire time. Because watching someone watch your video, then you're a consumer all of a sudden. And I was like, this intro's way too long, Jesse. What the heck? But when I'm exporting it, I'm like, ooh, this is great. And so I know a little bit of what you're talking about.
You see them start to fade, and it's like, Casey, you
you see the eyes glaze over, and you're like, no, like, yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
One good example was while I was jumping up on the fence thing.
Yeah.
Everybody was laughing at jumping up on the fence, saying, oh, that's so hilarious. And I'm talking and I'm saying like my punchline I just built up to.
Important things.
And the visuals distracted from the message. Well, it not that distracted, because what I should have done was have moved that 40 seconds later. Yeah. So that while I was talking, I was walking towards the fence, and as soon as I am done talking, I start jumping and just let the clip speak for itself. You know? So little things like that where I'm like, ooh, I that's interesting. I cringe a little bit. Where I'm like, damn. Another really common one was I prefaced the whole thing with, and this was a part of me editing, re-editing, moving, editing, re-editing, move. Yeah. Where things were not in the perfect order that I wanted them to be. So when I was talking about, when I said I'm wearing level 4 and 5 armor in these clips, you tell me, and this was my preface. You tell me if you think what you see in these clips is going to motivate me
Yeah.
to use gear or to just go in with a Mosin. And then it was just me getting running along, fade to black. And that was originally like a part of my script that was in a section where I was talking about the whole economy of you buy stims, you buy food, you go in, you die, you repair your stuff, you go in, you die, you repair your stuff. None of the thing has, it was mostly about like value and economy and whether things are worth it. But it kind of just ended up being in the middle of a section where I was talking about armor, effectiveness. So everybody walked away, like all the comments were, what does he expect?
Of course,
he got one tap in the
Slick
headshot.
wouldn't help you. Yeah, I kind of got that point, but because we have, 150 hours of talking about this, so I was able to. But I can understand how that.
Yeah.
But overall, man, it landed, and it was obvious that it landed, and it's obvious that it didn't land just to me. That video had like 250,000 views in 24 hours. A lot of content creators were retweeting it and saying like, please watch this video. And then because I want to be able to talk through these changes, dude. Okay, so like that video, Trey's recoil video came out recently, which was talking a lot about like Spectator 9's original video, where like the recoil feels like, the point of contact is still your hand, even if you have a buttstock. I don't know if you saw that Spectator 9 video where like, which made a lot of sense to me as far as like why we're losing our optics and stuff like that. Like, why does it do that? You know what I mean? I would go up with the gun. Anyways, all that came out, and then the community was in like a really interesting spot. I was in a really interesting spot. The 48 hours between today and your video coming out, I was struggling because I had been now convinced that we need some of these things back. I had already been really frustrated at like the movement very specifically for me. I know a lot of people are frustrated about the recoil. The movement has been what's killing me recently. And now I was in this spot where I was like, well, damn it, like fix it. You know what I mean? Like, I know these changes are just values on a spreadsheet. Fix it. You know what I mean? And I was struggling with those deaths even more. And I was starting, like, I was texting my buddy, like, and I was like, this is brutal. Like, I don't know how, like, now that I've seen the light, I don't know how I'm going to be able to make it through. And I had people last night, yesterday on my stream last night being like, yo, like, do you think we're going to see some movement or some stamina or some recoil changes in this hotfix? And I was like, dude, man, I would love that. But I was like, I wouldn't expect to see anything, if we get anything, for months. Like yesterday I was saying this. I was like, great videos and all, but Lamau, dude, like no shot. So we wake up today and it's funny. I actually saw your tweet of the little peepo guy drinking the juice, just spinning around. That was it. I saw that first. And then I clicked on the comments and everybody was like, dude, like finally getting some things done, like my man. And I was like, yo, what happened? So we actually get some changes and I want to talk about them. And I'm glad that you've played. I'm glad that you have, however long you've been on, a few hours now to get some stuff. But the original tweet from Battlestate Games said they reduced the recoil angle for all weapons, reduced the stamina penalty when hit by any type of ammo, increased the weight limit while overweight, reduced stamina consumption in various cases, decreased energy and water consumption while in raid, greatly reduced penalties from armored rigs and body armor. And I could not believe it, bro. I could not believe it. Like, before we even dive into what the changes are, like, that's insane.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
That fast.
Here's well, I mean, these types of changes are literally,
yes,
like, they're not complicated.
No.
It's numbers, right?
On a spreadsheet that the game references. Like,
here's the thing. Like, everybody, not everybody, but a ton of people have been like thanking me. Of course, wasn't just me, right? I had been saying most of these things, screaming it at the top of my lungs for 18 months. But what the difference was whether it was the video, whether it was everybody was on the lowest of the lows, right? all of the content creators that like showed the love and spread it to their communities,
Yeah.
as well as the community members. I think they were like, I don't know whether it was like emotionally exhausted or whatever. I explained this earlier where before, let's say there's 100 people in the community,
Yeah.
10 people disagreed and 90 people agreed with what I said, but 80 of those 90 would agree like this while watching, like, yep, totally true. I've been feeling the same, struggling with money, struggling with fights, struggling with endurance, frustrations, whatever.
Yep.
And they are kind of silently in agreement. And 10 people of the 90 agree. So for almost 2 years,
Yeah.
there's been 10 people saying yes, 10 people saying no.
Yep. And it felt
And
pretty
that's
split.
what's been, and exactly. And that's what's been so frustrating. And I feel like this video was the last straw for the other 80
Yeah.
to get up off their asses
Yeah.
and be like, yo,
And drown out
agree.
the haters like completely.
Where the did everybody like,
Yeah.
holy, this whole time I felt like I was kind of not alone, but like on looking at a bunch of people,
Yeah.
I picture the old like 50s, greaser. They've all got the knives and the chains and they're
Yeah.
about to fight, right? And it was me and 4 people and then a giant mob on the other side.
Yep.
And this video releasing was me looking around and then seeing the 7 million,
Yep.
coming behind me like, we got your back.
Yeah.
And I think all of that together,
For sure.
plus all of the other content creators, is what this, like, it's so cheesy, but it literally was the community coming together behind
For sure.
the messages of a few of us.
For sure, because it was able to like weaponize the information in a positive way. Because if everybody was just like, because this is what happens when everybody can get behind something on Twitter, it's just like change this, and everybody has a different definition of what they want changed. And then on the flip side, in the past, you've made videos, or I've made videos, or Trey's made videos, or Clean's made videos about like, I want like a really well thought out video that's like, man, I want this changed. But if there isn't a response to the video, then it never makes it to Battle State Games. And if there's a response, but no actionable information, then nothing happens. So it really was, the video was such a specific and pointed and targeted, like, just watch, just look for yourself and see how different it is. And what was great about the video was, and reference it against the Raid series, which is literally what, because that's the thing, is that like, you could say old Tarkov isn't what Nikita wants because they changed it. And you can say new Tarkov is what Nikita wants because it's what we have. But all those are arguments and whatever. But to actually have like Nikita give us what he wants in a, multi-million-dollar budget thing, like, this is what I want it to be like. This is what I want it to feel like. This is what I want it to. And then for you to be like, look at these MFers, dude. Homie gets shot in the hand and just, puts the gun on the arm. Like, I don't want to be able to rest my gun on my arm. I just want to feel like that guy. I want to feel like an operator. And so it was just this like perfect. The community responded. The other content creators responded. And it was actionable.
And don't forget, Nikita, like, Nikita responded. And I cannot stress enough because he gets so much, it's basically like me, Clean, and Nikita, probably get like, I don't even know how I would compare them, but like just tons of.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I genuinely want people to understand he gets it, and he gets it more and more every time we talk.
Yeah.
He genuinely cares.
Yeah.
And he sees it. So. Like, so many people are like, I'm not really looking forward to, I don't think the changes are going to come. There's no way Nikita doesn't give a shit. And I can't tell you how untrue that is.
Yeah.
So,
which is good to hear, because I think an easy position for you to take, and I think what a lot of people want to take because they love drama, is for you to be like, okay, yeah, I got it fixed. Nikita doesn't know better. You know what I mean? Nikita, you know what I mean? That's the easy thing to be like, yeah, I do know better. And Nikita, but to say like, it wasn't a fight with Nikita. It was just finding the way to communicate the right thing to show. And then that his response wasn't like, fine, you babies, but was like, oh, shoot. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's really important to know
Yeah.
that distinction. You know, that Nikita wasn't just like middle finger, I'm tired of the complaining, change the numbers on the spreadsheet, but that he was like, I get it. I understand, you know, we're trying to take the game in this direction, and it's valuable to hear feedback from people who put together actual feedback. Let's make the change. Let's do it. And let's see how it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and before, when I was talking about the 90 versus the 10, before Nikita was looking at the feedback, right? Whether it's Reddit, forums, whatever, and he sees 10 people say yes, 10 people say no, and it's like, well, maybe if I change something, people are going to be mad, so maybe I don't. You know, I have my own plans. We're just going to go ahead with it. But then all of a sudden, if you see 90% be like, we want this thing and we feel strongly about it, it's like, oh, okay.
Oh,
you know, so this is why, like, people need to, the moment you guys get toxic and like, you know, like Nikita tweets out like, hey, look at my new puppy, and someone's like, fix your game. It's like, okay, you've made it less likely, you know what I mean? That he's gonna fix your game for you. Be vocal and be constructive as much as you can, and this proved it.
Yep.
You know, Tarkov isn't a democracy. It's up to Nikita.
Yeah.
But the more you know, the more you understand, the more perspective you have. Yeah. The game's going to be better.
So all that being said, mega props to Nikita for being willing to like be like, oh yeah, I see it. I see the feedback. I see your feedback specifically. And like, I see and understand this content of what you're saying, and then to see the feedback and make changes. And big ups to Battle Say Games. I mean, I would have bet my entire stashes. I would have bet my account, my EOD account, that even if you told me yesterday, 100% Nikita saw the video, liked it, and he's going to change stamina, I would have bet my 6,000 hour account that we wouldn't have seen those changes for 6 months. And the fact that we saw it was insane. So there was that, and then yeah, man. So every single thing, we did some testing and we looked at some of the like websites and stuff like that, and every single thing. So like we can kind of go through the changes. The stamina, which by the way, I tweeted this out, and I tweeted out, I know this patch will go down in history as the recoil patch, but to me it's the movement patch. Like, I'm glad we did some recoil stuff, but this is the movement patch, dude. Literally every single thing that affects your stamina was lessened. Running decreases your stamina less.
When you crouching, it doesn't affect your stamina at all until you stand
back up. And
it's like, oh my god, yo, he discovered gravity.
And even that, dude, me and Velian, we're just like teabagging. We were like, look at it, look at how many times we can do it. Like, it was crazy. Crouching, even getting up from prone reduces less stamina.
It also affects arm stamina, I think, a little bit too, which is like, makes sense.
Yep. Getting shot. I repeat, getting shot is the stamina reduction was reduced by like 40 or 50% when getting shot. I don't know if you saw Valiant's clip. We were in offline. I was like, pain kill so you don't limp, right? And run at me. So he had a full stim, but he wasn't on SJ6. Okay, so he's like level 15 endurance, right? So he was pain killed, but he wasn't on any stamina things. And I was like, run at me. And I shot him in the leg, 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 shot him in the arm, shot him in the leg, and he died before he stopped running on all limb shots. And I was like,
dude, what you just said was literally like sex in my ears.
Dude.
He died before he stopped running.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. That's what a Giga Chad.
Yes.
They die running on their feet.
Dude, it was so epic. So prone, crouch, just running in general, getting shot while running, all of the things that affect running. Overweight was changed. So like the kit that I had been running yesterday, it was an SR25 kit, TV rig. I haven't been underweight once the whole wipe. I logged on and I was underweight. I was like, oh shoot. So they reduced that. It's also how much stamina you lose when overweight was reduced. So now it's harder to be overweight, and when you're overweight, you can still run faster. The amount of Speed you lose. You know how the heavier you are, the like lower your max speed is. That was reduced as well. Just everything, every single thing. So to me, this is the movement patch, dude.
Bro, I went into
so
factory.
epic.
I went into factory, and the last 2 raids I did before we started, I was like rocking a Korund. But before that, I had a Gen 4 assault. No, not assault. High mobility, whatever the one
HMK,
sleeveless
yeah,
one. And messed around with the MP7 and the RPK, and in both of them, it was like come across a guy, see him, bop, 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 dead. I'm like fucked up. Another guy comes and I'm like bop, 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 bullets. I run around the corner.
Dude.
I start healing. I come up, roll over, bop, 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 I kill him. It's like, and then I pick up a gun. I pick up the rig, and then I look down and my stamina's full.
Ooh.
And I run to the exfil, and I'm not walking as I'm opening the door like, oh God. It was like,
dude,
it was just
intuitive. It felt good.
It was 2019. Dude.
Yeah. And so like, and then another sleeper change when it comes to movement is they dramatically, and I think by 50% reduced all of the penalties of armor and armored rigs. And those penalties are turn speed, and ergonomics. So like,
yeah,
so
that's something that Clean
all of your
talked a lot about.
guns feel better because the ergo hit of your armor. And that's the thing is like I never talk about that either. I always overlook that. I'm always like, oh, this has 37 ergo. Okay, cool. And then I throw a bunch of armor on and I never even double click. I don't even see how much, like the helmet, the armor, how much ergo did that take away? I never look at that. And so like, I was just like ADSing my SR25. I was like, what the hell? Why do and I was just like turning. I was just mousing back and forth. I was like, why do I feel so good? And it was like, oh, this wasn't even a gun change. This was an armor change. And like, that's such a sleeper change that you feel more responsive, more in control of your PMC, and snappier with your guns because of an armor change.
And that was 100%, I'm sure, inspired by a lot of what Clean has talked about.
Yeah.
We've had conversations about that before where it's like redundant. You already have the weight penalty to your movement, and that already like slows everything down. So
having an additional penalty,
it's just redundant. Yeah. Oh yeah, man.
So that was all reduced by 50%. I don't know exactly how much, but reduced the decreased energy and water consumption in raid. I mean, I know this is something you have spoken about many times. That's huge. I noticed it today. I was like popping painkillers like candy, and I was like still chilling.
Dude, killing those 2 guys, killing another 2 guys, getting out, dropping their gear. So now I have now in 2 raids, I've got 3 more guns and 2 more like level 4, level 5 armored rigs.
Yeah. With
some magazines and some stuff. I killed Tagilla twice in a row, and one time he had a blue key card.
That's insane, by the way.
Like, not only am I
so bad,
I could take the gear of the kills. I wasn't punished for it. It allowed me to survive more, to be able to kill the boss, to be able to then have the chance. Like,
I wish you could imagine being able to sell that key card for 12 million rubles, and how different of an experience. You know what I mean? Like, yesterday I had
186 rubles.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine being like, yesterday I had no gear and 600 rubles. They make these changes. Now I have 10 million rubles in a stash full of gear.
0 to hero, baby. Like, you've never seen it before.
Yeah. So, dude, W changes across the board. W. So the movement, that's the most important thing to me. We talk about the recoil. The recoil changes, the recoil changes are interesting. I don't know if you know more about this than I do. It appears I've been listening to like No Food After Midnight, who knows a lot about this stuff. It feels like, so it wasn't vertical recoil. It wasn't horizontal recoil. It was a hidden stat from the player called recoil dispersion that doesn't go on a scale to 1 to 100. As I understand it, it goes on a scale of 0 to 40. All guns across the board were reduced by 10. So that's a 25% reduction across the board. I don't know what recoil dispersion does, but it made it so like some guns don't feel that much different. Some guns feel much different. And in some cases, like some guns that feel bad felt really good. Some guns that felt good don't feel different. Some guns that felt good feel much better. And some guns that felt bad don't feel that much better. So like in general, I'm not really for just like a full blanket, especially when it comes to recoil, because some of the guns are already so good. But it definitely did make some guns viable that weren't. Like I grabbed a G36 and I was like, oh my God, this went from completely unusable to usable. So that was an interesting way to go about it. I haven't played with enough guns to super criticize it or say it's a W yet, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like I was actually going to work on a video as like a follow-up.
Yeah.
Kind of showcasing a bunch of different games and how I think they did recoil and movement better than Tarkov before, and I was going to advocate for like this is the kind of so I was most likely arguing for something a little bit different than what we have.
Yeah.
But what we have, it feels fine.
Yeah.
Like there's an infinite number. Like if you can play a million different first person shooters and they're all going to have different feels.
Yeah.
And most of them, I played Ready or Not, Insurgency, they all have totally different feelings, but they all feel good. Tarkov felt bad before. It doesn't feel amazing.
Yeah.
Like there's still a couple guns with some like weirdness.
Yes.
But also, and some people have asked and stuff, I'm sure they're going to be doing more tweaks and more changes, and we might have more systems. They might have total improvements, whatever. All that matters right now is that I know that they're open to changes. They're going to start tweaking stuff more. And right now it feels good.
Yep.
So I'm not going to
exactly overly.
Oh, Nikita, can you
there's
fix this?
So many
fix
people
this,
doing that. Dude, there's so many people be like, well, I know we just had the best, day ever, but actually this gun, and it's like, dude,
when are you gonna fix the audio?
Take a day, take a few days. To me, like the biggest dub, a huge thing was a few hours later, they said, we made a balance change, and everyone was like, oh God, did they revert it? And it was like, we reduced camera recoil by 20% for all weapons.
And it made it even better.
Which is astounding, because camera recoil, basically, as I understand camera recoil, it's really just the separation of like my eye from being able to look through the optic, which is like intrinsically feels unrealistic, because like watching all those recoil videos, like especially with a rifle, if I'm holding it, any recoil impulse happens to the gun and me. So if it goes up, it's because I'm going up too. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit, but like there were some really dramatic guns where like you shoot and your gun's at a 45-degree angle and your head's at a 90-degree angle, and it's like, why am I so separate? So like, so that made it even better, where the guns, because now I hopped into Valiant's chat and I was watching him test the new camera recoil, and there's lots of guns like the SA-58. The SA-58 still like wiggles when you're shooting it, but you're so much more attached to the gun that it's like, I could make that work. Like that's not a laser beam, and that's not 2019 FAL. The 2019 FAL, you could shoot people from 80 meters away, just headshot, like full auto. That's not the 2019 FAL, but it's a hell of a lot better than yesterday's FAL. There's slightly less recoil, and the camera recoil, I'm so much more attached to the gun. Like I could make that work. So,
like in the MP7, like within 25 meters is like, it has some nice natural little bit of bounce back and forth, but it's like a laser beam, but it should be, because it's a submachine gun.
Yes.
So in 20 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters, it should be just, I mean, you saw in the video,
dude,
right?
Yeah.
But then if you engage like the third or fourth target, you're not hitting headshots like a laser beam. So it really, like, none of the guns that I've tested, at least, now granted, I don't have max level recoil control. I don't have meta guns.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have to, it's possible that it'll be OP with all of those things, but they can tweak it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not, you shouldn't just say something isn't perfect, so I'm unhappy with it, right? We're happy with what we've got. Let's keep moving forward. But right now, like, people crying about the COD movement and the laser beam recoil, and there's no laser beam recoil at all.
Nope.
It's infinitely better than it was yesterday, and the movement it's like marginally faster.
Yeah.
but it feel like looking at the people I was playing against, none of them looked faster. None of it looked jankier, but it felt infinitely better.
Yeah. If you're complaining about bunny hopping, people playing too fast, and laser beam guns today, you just haven't played much Tarkov. You just like you didn't play back when all those things were issues. Like it isn't. And that's the thing is like one of the very first comments I retweeted, and I was like, man, I'm so excited about these changes. One of the very first comments was like, doesn't this just take us back to when everybody was bunny hopping around and laser beam recoil? And I was like, no, like not at all. Like that, like I don't know what people thought, but like back then we had no weight system. You could literally have 80 kilograms in your bag and you could run, the penalty was maybe 5%, right? You know what I mean? Like there was no weight system. Back then, you could go an entire wipe without drinking a bottle of water. An entire wipe. You remember back in the day when if you died, you just arrived back at your stash with max like 100 full like every time you died or survived a raid.
And water and
all
energy.
Your water, yeah. It's just like if you survived a raid, you just had max water and energy again. Like you could go a whole wipe without needing water. So it's like
I never did. I leveled up metabolism as a meme.
Yeah.
It was something to do.
And when we say there were laser beam guns, go look at 2019 M4s and HKs, right? Like there was no recoil. So like this is like so much in the middle. Like this is so much more in the middle of what we had before, and this is what we wanted. When people were excited about the weight system, when people are excited about clean set weapon malfunctions, it was like, it wasn't, I want the weight system so that I can't move. It was like, back then we were like, let's take the edge off some of this stuff. And then we just ripped it to 100 miles per hour. And it was like, hey, what about 35? 35 seems really good. You know what I mean? So
and a lot of these systems too weren't necessarily there. Like the weight system, like I'm sure Nikita had the weight system and inertia and all of these things planned far before people were 360 giga chatting on labs with a juice cannon.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen the numbers in the bottom corner for the weight.
Exactly.
17 years before any of these features.
Yeah.
They've always been there.
The hydration and energy have always been there.
Yeah. It just so happens that the first few iterations over the, like, think about the changes that they just made, last night and today. We feel better. It's in the right direction. They're going to make more changes that are going to be good. Some are going to be bad. They might have to tweak it. What we saw, though, was one of those changes that might have not been the greatest set of changes, or over time, a bunch that kind of compounded over and over again without any movement in the other direction.
Yeah.
So it was like a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse. So much that like it's hard for people to recognize things are getting worse. Like your hair, you don't see your hair getting longer until you look in the mirror one day. You're like, oh, I gotta get a haircut.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, take all that weight off your shoulders, and it's like, oh wow,
exactly.
Now I realize what I've been missing.
And it helps me how I described it earlier was like they were making a better game while simultaneously removing our ability to enjoy it. They didn't have to change much about the game, but they gave us some of the ability, like the way in which we enjoy it back. And so now the game feels so fresh and so good in more ways than just the movement, in more ways than just the recoil. You know what I mean? And we can appreciate some of these other things in a new light. So yeah, man, overall, the changes are a W, and like, God, you know what I mean? Like I really haven't been pulled down by them, but the Debbie Downers are killer. Even the analytical ones, like, well, this gun's still broken. It's like, dude, take a chill pill. Take a W. Like they just showed us they were open to tweaking it, you know what I mean? And they were open to feedback about it. Let's not close the loop, you know what I mean? Let's keep the loop open. We finally brute forced the community into a loop where we were like, oh, I don't know about this change. Here's actionable feedback. And then here's the community saying, yeah, that actionable feedback will be good. And then they gave us the feedback. Don't veer off of the loop by just complaining and whining about everything. Stay in the loop. Stay in the loop, fam. If there's something that needs to be changed, let's just talk about it like adults. You know what I mean? Like, we finally got the loop connected. Stay in the loop. Just provide feedback. Don't lose your goddamn mind over it. Just like apply some common sense and let's keep the loop going. Yes. Are some guns still OP? Yeah, sure. Do some things need to be changed? Yes. Would I have loved that a part of this movement thing is that I don't go down to 1.5% movement speed when I leaf touches my left elbow? Yes, I would have loved some of those changes too. But let's take a W here. You know what I mean? And like, and the people who are, you know, I've seen a bunch of people who are like, well, now all the Giga Chads are just going to be able to move so fast. And it's like, dude, once again, you don't understand. Like, Rengar's already elite strength and endurance. Velian's already elite strength. I'm already most of the way to elite strength. We were the ones that were already moving really quickly. It's you that benefits from this more than me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, now you can run away when the Giga Chad shoots you because you have actual calves and can run. Like, it's the casuals benefit from this movement change so much more than the Chads.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. So I don't know.
At this point, I'm gonna just let the changes like speak for themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
They'll have their mind changes by
They
it,
will.
or they won't. And
Subconsciously or consciously, I believe that almost everybody that plays the game will have their mind changed by that. Okay, so we hopped on early for the podcast because we wanted to talk about these changes. We want to talk about the video. However, we also have a surprise guest coming on the show. Is he like ready to rumble, do the thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna send him the link basically as soon as we go.
Yeah, let me do this first. But
yeah.
but we have a surprise guest. I'm super excited. But before we bring him on, I do want to once again thank you guys so much for the help and just for like supporting the podcast. It's so sick. We do want to take a second and thank the sponsor for this week's episode of the podcast, and that is Factor. So Factor is you basically get pre-made, ready to eat food delivered to your door on a weekly basis. So it's a whole nother step of not even having to cook the food. It's 34 chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options. So every week you get to pick between 34, and there's always something new to try. You get them delivered right to your door. You can heat them up and ready to go. So for people with a super busy lifestyle, who are just on the go, who don't really enjoy cooking, who just want to have food ready to go. A lot of people are into meal prepping, whether you hit the gym or whether you're just at work a lot or whatever. This is a really, really cool way to get fresh, constantly changing, delicious food delivered to your door. So if you have goals, whether those goals are for just eating better or weight loss or just being more efficient with your time. I have tried Factor personally, and the convenience factor of it is through the roof. Once again, being able to log in, change how many meals you get every single week, change what you get every single week. If you want to go keto, if you want to go meats and veggies, all this kind of stuff. It really just feels like it makes a lot of sense. It's laid out really well. The food is delicious, and it's all just delivered to your door. So Factor is really, really cool. You can achieve or maintain your goals this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. So head to factormeals.com/pogcast60 and use code pogcast60 to get 60% off your first box. That is code pogcast60 at factormeals.com/pogcast60 to get 60% off your first box. This is a great way to start because you can just literally take a huge discount right off your first box. And like we said, there's no commitment. So every single week you can just like change it or stop if you want to. So this is a great way to get in 60% off your first box. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
Gracias.
Gracias.
All right. So massive total, like last minute, unexpected, epic guest. We have with us Jonathan Blow, the developer of many games, Braid, The Witness. I know you.
Most of which are not that much like Tarkov, actually.
Yeah, most of which are not like Tarkov, but in some ways are. I know you spent, I think, at least a decade even before Braid, right? Just in the industry, and I know at least for a lot of folks outside of those, two games directly, I think might be more common that people would recognize you from if they saw Indie Game the movie. That's how I got introduced to a lot of the names in the space. So yeah, the reason why we have you on here is obviously because you're just like a indie game designer, legend, developer, but also because out of nowhere, after I had released my video a few days back, I suddenly see a retweet from Jonathan. But I'm like, Jonathan, like that's can't be. Click on the
Can't
thing.
be.
Like, oh, okay. And you had like a ton to say, and I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
like I'm the type of person that like writes a tweet, responds to my own tweet 17 times because I've got too much to say, and I was like, oh, this is exactly what we need. And I was surprised to hear that you played Tarkov, that you even knew about Tarkov. So how'd you get into Tarkov?
Yeah.
Like what?
I mean, I hang out on Twitch once in a while, right? And I stream, but I usually stream programming, right? So it's sort of a different area of Twitch. It's like the back alley of Twitch where people don't usually go. But I game a little bit on stream, and I just Twitch is a great way to see what's going on, right? And so back, I don't actually remember what year it was, but I think it was when they first did the Christmas tree, right?
Okay.
There was like a burst of people coming on
Yep.
because of that. And I was like, oh, what's this game? And I got into it. Like back then, you still couldn't. I don't know if you can actually buy it today, but back then you would press the buy button, and they were like, we'll email you in a couple days with like a download link or something. Right?
Yep.
But a couple days later, I got to try this game out, and it was pretty cool. And I like it a lot because it's just its own thing, right? Like especially most shooter games, they're aiming to be the highest budget, biggest audience thing.
Yeah.
And they end up copying each other, and you have like mostly the same thing across all these games. But like Tarkov is clearly not doing that. And so as someone who really likes game design, I'm just really interested in the game because of that, right? It's like, oh, here's a game that's doing new work in this category. And it was really, well, I couldn't ever say it was fun to play, but it's really, interesting to play. And I played a bunch. Most of my time on the game, I would say, happened before the customs expansion.
Okay.
And I've played somewhat since then. And then I've played, I would say, very little since Inertia got added. And I don't think that's a coincidence, right? Like it felt really bad to move. I don't know how it feels today, right? I don't know if the new settings.
You'll have to give it a try. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. But you said everybody in chat just completely acknowledged, like, oh, okay, yeah, he plays Tarkov. When you said, I don't know if I have fun. It was the craziest. I don't even know what to call it. Not coincidence. It felt like almost a weird cosmic overlap when I saw your retweet with your comments, and then I was like pulled up a couple of YouTube videos, and there's a 7-minute clip from I think 2012. It's like 10, 12, 13 years ago, and I swear to God, you could have been, if I had bleeped out Braid, you could have said Tarkov, and everything you said would have made sense. And actually, like 2 or 3 of the exact phrases I used in the video, you used in the video in the interview like 12 years ago, that I almost like, did I see this? And then subconsciously remember it. So you said, and I would love to have you expand on some of these things, because there's like 3 or 4 elements. You said, let me look. I thought it was actually really meaningful that you had said that there are, there's different genres of film with different emotional expectations. But video game genres are more on mechanical lines than emotional lines. And that's what separates, in my opinion, it's what separates every first-person shooter from every first-person shooter, let alone the different genres between them. But just within the genre, it's what are the mechanics? This one's got vaulting. This one's got, prone, all kinds of stuff. This one has jetpacks. This one's in zero gravity. Tarkov, I feel like, was one of the first that I played, at least, that had almost that emotional genre difference, in very much the same way that like Saving Private Ryan you play that game or you watch that movie, it's not a happy-go-lucky, enjoyable, fun movie.
Yeah.
You want to feel kind of like, but also you want to feel like some patriotism. Like there's so many other elements. It's not about enjoying the movie. And I feel like Tarkov is like that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel it's different from most shooters in the way it creates mood, right? Like the mood, Tarkov has a very consistent mood of the world. And the thing that really works about it for me is I think it's more subtle than some other games. Okay, I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm gonna name games that I know people who worked on them, right? But like I can think of games from the past that very explicitly had an agenda of doing this kind of thing, and it came out like just kind of shallow and like not that real, right? So I'm thinking of like Spec Ops: The Line, for example.
Yeah.
That's a really old game at this point, right? But the point of that was to be this dystopian world where the main character was an anti-hero and everything sucked. But it was just kind of a shallow cartoon version of it, right?
Yeah.
And somehow, on the other hand, Tarkov has Santa Claus, but it's still actually more of a serious dystopian thing that feels deeper, right? And like, how do you do that? It's like, it's a million different things. It's a consistency, right? And I don't know, that's something that very few games manage to accomplish. Really.
That's a really interesting point on like, I haven't played Spec Ops: The Line, but I watched a video on it. And somebody made like a video essay on like that game and like what it was trying to say and the tone it was trying to set. And I found it really interesting. And it is interesting because like, what's almost like a hilarious fact about Tarkov is how little any of us largely in the community know about the lore. So the storytelling, the like really overt storytelling of like, this guy's the bad guy, this guy's the good guy, this guy's the fractured hero. There isn't that. There is no, we don't know anybody's names really. You know what I mean? A lot of people are like stunned to find out that the USEC faction are actually like the bad guys in the lore. And so it is interesting that Tarkov is able to like give you that, or at least a part of that experience without the very traditional like narrative of like, who are you and where are you going and why are you trying to get there? They do it all like experientially. I don't think that's a word, by like allowing you to share in the loss. You know, when you die, you lose everything, you know, suck it, middle finger to you, figure out a way to do it. And I think like they've been surprised at how much that resonated with people because of how different it is. But that's just a really interesting point that it's like the whole experience they've been able to give has almost been like sans narrative. And they're kind of trying to do that a little bit now with like Lightkeeper and some of the lore. And how other shooters that have maybe tried to do that fell a little flat because it was just a similar experience mechanically with different lore. And maybe that hasn't been able to get the player as far as they wanted to get them.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the opportunity that you have in a multiplayer game. I mean, it's a problem and it's an opportunity, right? Like in a single player game, it's naturally like you could have all these characters that you meet and like cutscenes and whatever, right? And in a multiplayer game, first of all, you don't really want to focus on those because you're making the multiplayer. But then second, even if you put those in, they get old really fast. Like you play a multiplayer game a long time usually.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like, how much are you going to watch these cutscenes or whatever? So they naturally become a minority of the game. And so you end up with this kind of world building, right? That single player people do, I think, less well because they don't get as much practice at it, which is just like what's in the world. It's like, okay, here's a loot location. We're going to call it the USEC stash. And it's like the backstory is some guys holed up there for a little bit while they were trying to get somewhere else or something. And like, you just pile up 100 of those or 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
And then you have a world full of things. And the thing is your subconscious sees these things. And even when you don't totally understand all the individual ones, they still weave together and like make something.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of games don't have that. A lot of games try to hit you over the head with the thing. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's often called, you know, environmental storytelling, which is when you put these things in the world that you draw your own conclusions about. And really, that's the majority of the kind of storytelling in Tarkov. I mean, there's a little bit of quests.
Yeah.
Now there's the Lightkeeper, but almost everything is environment. And,
yeah.
I mean, if you like, I think in Tarkov, there's a very dramatic improvement over time in like how good the maps are and how good that kind of information is in the maps, right? Like if you go to, Shoreline or something, there's like not a lot of that. And if you look at streets, there's just like tons of detail everywhere. And so it's definitely something it seems to me that they're very interested in and very deliberate about.
Yeah,
for sure.
One of the things, this is going to be like almost like a totally selfish line of questions, because I don't get to talk to game designers ever, right?
Okay.
I get to talk to Twitch chat, which are all professional game designers.
Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah.
And so, but I've always been fascinated and interested in tried to focus on what aspects of games make them good that aren't obvious. It's so easy to point to the obvious things and say, oh, I like this game because of this. I like this game because of this. And one of the things that comes up, and it's just something that you had said in that same interview from like 2012, was that you aren't designing your games specifically to be fun. You don't want to give the players the full, like, here's every hint you need, let me interrupt you. Like, you want to treat them like adults. You said you want to respect their time, which is something I said. I want a game that respects my time. I saw that video after. I was like, Jesus
was
Christ,
like
really?
In the video, yeah.
Holy crap. But I'm trying to like get my brain to the actual like meat of the question.
Yeah.
One thing that is constantly, I think, misunderstood, and I want to know if like my take on this is accurate at all. It's the idea that Tarkov isn't meant to be fun, and the logical conclusions that people come to are, anytime you're not having fun, it's good and it's intended.
Yeah.
And
no, I mean, that is a thing. So there's even simpler versions of that, right? So even ignoring the big question of fun, not fun, you can go to any simple mechanic, like, I don't know, like, my brain is blanking right now. But you like, for example, some justification for why the movement has to be slow, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we don't want people to just blaze through the map. We want sniping to be viable, right? We want, whatever list of things that you can get, right? And the thing that happens is, if you're not a game designer, it's very easy to look at the goal, which was like, oh, we want sniping to be viable or whatever, right? Or, we don't want fights to look like Call of Duty where you're running around with a chicken with your, or like, what's the game? Oh God, I'm trying to remember the name of this game. Hyper something.
Hyperscape, yeah.
Hyperscape. Oh my God, dude. I Alt F4'd out of that game. Because just like indoors, guys are like bouncing off the ceiling all the time.
It was absurd, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't play it. So you have that goal, right? And then you have in the game some way that goal was attempted to be accomplished and possibly even accomplished, right? And then people will use that as a justification anytime you get into an argument with them, which, by the way, the prerequisite for being a game designer is you got to be a dude with opinions about what you don't like in games, right? Because that's how you do something that other people aren't doing. And so that's who I was way back when I was a teenager or someone. I just had a lot of opinions about games, and then eventually I just turned that into designing them, right? But so just because one thing kind of accomplishes that goal, first of all, doesn't mean it's the only way to accomplish that goal. It certainly doesn't mean it's the best way to accomplish that goal. And in fact, it may be quite a bad way to accomplish the goal. So one thing that I was saying in that tweet thread, right? But people who want to argue with you will not see or acknowledge any of that. They'll say it has to be the way it is because that accomplishes this thing. And it's like, but hold on, right? So one of the things I said in that tweet thread was just, it's almost the natural pattern to fall into when you're designing a game is you have some picture in your mind about what the game's going to be like, and that's awesome, right? And then you start making the game and it doesn't match the picture, and you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
I want it to be more like the awesome thing. And so you start fixing it. And how do you fix it? Well, like, I observe that this thing that I want to happen isn't really happening, so let's make this change, and let's make this change. And often those changes involve slowing the player down, impeding the player, making the player do a bunch of stuff before they can do the other thing, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And like a common phrase is like, first the player has to, or now the player has to, or whatever. And the problem is you just start stacking a bunch of those, and then your game is just a bummer because it's all about preventing the player from everything, right? And now, but step by step, each step was maybe justifiable, but then you got somewhere, like, you know. And so what I was saying in those tweets was, there's a kind of a magic where sometimes you can take a step back and you can see, like, okay, I'm trying to do these things. And I had these initial ideas that are like, okay, thing A, I'm going to solve with, you know, getting in the way of the player A, and thing B, I'm going to solve by getting in the way of the player B. But sometimes you can step back and be like, wait, now that I have more experience thinking about this game, there's like, if I change this one thing that I wasn't even thinking about, it fixes like 3 of these problems, right? It's like a nonlinear way of attacking the
That's
design.
the best engineering, when you think you find some elegant way to like fix a bunch of stuff all at once. Like,
and it feels like, no, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, no, and it, I totally track what you're saying, and it feels like exactly just like one thing not related can positively affect 3 things that you didn't realize. The reverse happens, where like, if it's like almost like too easy of a solution, where it's like, this is a thing I don't want the player to do, let me just hit it on the hammer, you know, on the head with a hammer, and it'll stop that thing. It's like, well, where does that spider off into? And like, the phrase in your tweet thread was, you know, the problem is that X1, X2, and X3 almost always take form of frictions the player must be born by, or it must be borne by the player. And that, like, in the context of Tarkov, when we were watching Veritas's video and talking about it, it was like, I feel like that almost was like literally, like, I felt like I was playing the game in molasses. I felt like I was like I was dragging my player along to do what I wanted to do. I almost felt that word friction, like, physically. I was like, I feel like in anything I want to accomplish, I am immediately in the status quo as I am impeded in accomplishing that task, and I must overcome. And at a macro level, that might be good on beating a game or beating a boss or getting to a particular place. But on like spawning in and just traversing, I felt that friction. And it was just like the way that you put it. As a longtime player of Tarkov, I was able to just so easily reverse engineer all these things in a vacuum. Inertia, the weight system, all these things that might be good additions to the game, but in a vacuum to address a specific thing might even be an elegant solution or a good solution or the best solution. But at the macro level, all of these things came together, and just like without realizing it, the analogy Veritas just used before you hopped on is, you don't, like, your hair grows every single day, but you don't realize it until you're just like, I need to get a haircut. And I felt like that was just what happened to the Tarkov community over the past 48 hours. We all just looked in the mirror and went like, I need a haircut. Like, I can't do anything. Like,
yeah. I mean, 2 things to say about that is, one is there's a flip side to all of that, which is, this is also why games can be really hard to tune, right? Because you change one thing and you think you're addressing one problem, and it changes like 7 other things about the game. And like, now you're like, oh man, right? And but the other thing is, you know, you guys sort of have it better than everybody else, and also maybe worse. Let's say worse because you spend so much time playing this game, you have way more investment in it, so you suffer from it. You suffer from the problems more, but you also have it better because you have so much time on the game that like you're adapted to it and you can deal with the problems better. So like, my experience with Tarkov, it's very valuable as a designer to just think about like what happens when somebody first sits down to play your game, right? And my experience with Tarkov, even back before all these changes, it's very hard as a new player because like, you drop in, you have some starting gear, which like back then you had more than today, I think. and then you probably die, right? So you had some gun, like say I pulled out my M4, I died with it. Oh, I can scav. Scav has like, you know, the AK with no dust cover, no butt
Yeah.
stock or whatever. And you shoot 4 bullets and you're looking at the ceiling and it feels totally different than the M4 that you were just shooting. So like as a player trying to build the muscle memory, it's very hard already, right? Because and like the design of the game is like you probably don't even use the same gun twice in a row until you've played like 17 raids or something. Like I don't even know. That's very hard to deal with, right? And the key mappings and stuff. And so one thing I didn't get into in the tweet thread about the stamina, which you know, was one of my least favorite things last time I played, was how, you know, I'm low on stamina and like I'm trying to do stuff and the game just doesn't do that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's no indicator that it was because I was low on stamina, which again, I had enough hours in the game that I kind of knew to look down at the stamina bar and stuff. But a new player is just going to be like, well, half the time my guy doesn't really do stuff.
They're going to make sure their keyboard is plugged in. Like they're going to think something's wrong.
And it's extra bad. Well, because there's also mistakes you naturally make, right? So going back and forth between like, you know, what games was I playing before and during, like PUBG, like Blackout, like whatever other Battlefield and whatever. Like prone was maybe X in some of those games and like double tapping control in other ones and like C. And like, so maybe sometimes you're fat fingering and sometimes you remember the right thing. Just like as a new player, these are all these mistakes that you make. And then the game not doing the thing on purpose, you don't know if it didn't do it on purpose or if you hit the wrong key or if you were just confused and panicking because you're getting shot at. Like it's a very hard new player experience. So that's one reason why I'm in favor of a lot of these changes, because just like if you can control your character better, it just helps with all of this stuff, right?
It allows you to focus on the million other things that aren't in other games, like having magazines, knowing how many bullets are in them. Like there's so many things you have to focus on. It's impossible for new players now, I'm sure. It was already impossible for us back then. On the same topic, I think it's kind of sort of fascinating in a way how, I don't know if this happens in other games, how I feel like the experience, the learning, the honing of skills, abilities, of knowledge about the game, better or worse, the game, I don't know that it could function without the content creators around it and without like the wiki.
Yeah.
I don't think it could. No.
I don't think it could. And sometimes the thought comes into my mind, like, is that a strength of the design, like that it's challenging, or is that, my gut tells me it's a weakness in that good games, like as you've described before, they give you the tools and respect you enough to figure it out. But you know, a riddle that doesn't let you like logically come to one conclusion is a riddle. I used to do at my grandmother's house, she had these books, these lateral thinking problem books. And I always was frustrated because you would think that there was one solution and it always ended up being just an arbitrary one. Like the one was an old man is drinking a cup of tea. He suddenly goes blind. What happened? Like, I don't know, sniper across the window. It was an old man during World War. It turns out he left his spoon in the cup and he went to go sip and it poked him in the eye. It's like, that's the answer? There's no way that you could come to that. You know, like
on
that's
your
what
own,
sometimes feels like, you know, in Tarkov. So is it crazy for me to assume that that's not a strength, right? Like that's maybe a shortcoming that hopefully they'll address in the future.
I mean, I'm sure that they would plan to. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for them. But, you know, there is a way. So as a small developer, you kind of you use whatever advantages you could use, right, to get your game off the ground and get it going. And if it's like, well, you know, it's totally undocumented how the hell you successfully get off the map once you enter, but the community's telling each other it's fine, we can deal with that later. You can just kind of roll with it. Like everybody has priorities, right? And clearly for Tarkov, they have some priorities that I wouldn't totally agree with, right? But among them was like, let's build out the maps and build out the world and add guns and all these things, right? And so that's what they've been doing. And they obviously care more about that than like that you know where to extract.
That's literally the example that I gave. The example that I wrote down. To me, the novice game designer in me says, make sure that there's an in-game map, even if it's half in Russian or whatever, and like on the map, put the exfils.
Yeah.
That respects the player enough to know, hey, the information's there. Use your brain to find it.
Yeah.
And so then when you're sitting in the raid, I mean, my first montage I made 4 years ago in Tarkov, my favorite scene is I'm sitting there staring at the in-game map, and all of a sudden it's like, bang, I get shot. I'm like, no, I was looking at the map. Like, come on, you know. But that was like, it was fun because I was immersed, you know. But I was looking for an exfil, and they don't have the exfils on the map.
And what
you know, so it's like,
go ahead, you can finish that thought.
I was gonna say, so it's there's like a disconnect between. Ironically enough, Nikita's like, I don't like the wikis and I don't like the guides. I want people to figure it out. Then you need to like give us the maps with the exfils on there and make it so that we can buy them and take them in.
And then that's what's weird about it is that like, I don't know, once again, I'm not a game designer and I definitely can't speak for BSG's priorities, but if they don't want those things, it feels like they're tripping down farther into them. Like it feels like some of the newer quests are designed through the lens of knowing it's all going to be on the wiki anyway, so I'm going to make it hard for the wiki to accurately communicate the information. And that feels like a step farther into that black hole as opposed to a step back where we bring more information to the game. Like, you know, some of the new Lightkeeper quests, just like random things arbitrarily items that you need to craft things to turn in for Lightkeeper quests. So components of a recipe for a thing that you need, some of those components you just can't put in your secure container and they're rare. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so I have no feedback. Nothing tells me I can't put this in my secure container. It's rare. I've been chasing this thing forever. The wiki's really vague about where it can spawn because it can spawn everywhere. I finally found one and I can't use the mechanic that the game has given me to save this item. I need this. I have the secure container. The game is telling me you have the secure container to save items you need, and now I arbitrarily can't save this thing. And then it's like, well, it's because this quest is harder. And it's like, but it doesn't, what do you mean? Like, it feels like they're just like tripping farther down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand why, though, right? And there's, again, I can't really speak for another developer, but if it were my game and I were trying to make this, there's sort of two reasons. One is that all of the solutions that other games take toward, you know, understanding, you know, the earlier part you were talking about understanding, you know, quests and progression and stuff. You know, like Assassin's Creed or whatever has a million HUD markers everywhere. And you play that game, and they work so hard, like making a lush world, but you don't see the world because you're looking at the HUD markers, right? And so obviously, you know, Nikita doesn't want that, right? So great, respect, right? And then the other problem that I suspect that they're thinking about, which is a hard problem also. So, well, the reason that one's a hard problem is you have to come up with a new solution to all this stuff that's embedded in the world.
Yeah.
That feels like the world. And, you know, those quests, the way the quests work right now is pretty far from that. And so what would you even do? And maybe they have an idea for what they would do, but it's just really hard and takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. But the second thing is, you know, with Tarkov, I have never gotten here, but I observe that most streamers do, right? Like the win condition of the game right now is that you kind of top out in terms of being successful at it. And then you kind of get bored. It's like, I've done all the things. I've got more money than I need.
Yeah.
And I know how to make more money over time. And then why is the game interesting to still play? And the answer right now is, well, we do a wipe, right?
Yeah.
But that's not, you know, you would like as a designer a better answer than that. And so you have this question of like, how do you make the game viable as a thing that doesn't wipe all the time, right? Like how do you make it interesting to keep playing? And one answer to that, which helps, but I don't think is that good of a permanent answer. It's clearly not a permanent, but you add more quests and you make them harder, is you're just extending that period that people have something interesting that they can do.
Yeah.
But the problem they also have is now they have streamers with years of experience playing their game, and everybody can blow through the content much faster than they did the first time they played, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really extend the playtime by that much for those people. But you know, if you were thinking about the game as I want someone to be able to play this for 3 years without a wipe and not be done with all the quests. Like, how do you do that? And well, you make them harder, right? But like I said, there's good ways of making them harder and bad ways of making them harder, right? I haven't played any of the specific quests you're talking about. I haven't played since Lightkeeper at all.
Yeah.
I'm traveling them on a laptop, but like sometimes that's affected by other things, right? So if it feels unfair or uncool that you have to extract with this item, then maybe as a designer, you address the things that make it feel unfair. So like if the netcode's better, if you feel more like when you die, it's your fault. If you have more survivability, if you're trying to avoid combat, like one of my most frustrating times, like the first time I played Tarkov, it was like, way toward the end of a wipe again, because it was like, Christmas, right?
Yeah.
And I was trying to do the Jaeger quest on Woods, where like you get the note, right, and get it out of the raid. And it took, I want to say 9 tries, because I was just getting killed, I don't know, by like people with thermals, or like back then, the scavs saw you very clearly, very far away, like through grass, and you couldn't see them. It was like they had thermal eyeballs. And like, I was like, I'm just trying to go in Woods and stay away from everything and get this note and leave. And I died 9 times in a row, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I don't, but if you felt less like that, and well, here's the thing about loot in the game now, right? And I think this is a side effect of the game starting with a small number of maps and then growing, right? And that is just, there's some variation among maps about what you find there, but mostly it's like maps are kind of the same, and quests is why you go to different ones. And so like, on a given map, it's like, oh, this building has a lot of meds, right?
Yeah.
This one has a bunch of jackets or whatever. But say you wanted to get some very specific item, if you knew that there was a map where that item was much more likely than other maps, then at least you have some choice as the player about what you're doing, and you're not just waiting for the game to randomly, like, I'm not looting Jaeger stashes until the RNG gives me the item, right?
Yeah.
That's what sucks, right? If you feel like you can do something deliberate to get the item, then you fail at that, that's on you, and that's a good game, right?
But now you can craft it or buy it on the flea market.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things that I think was a response to people very much like, what you were saying, where I'm like, I'm struggling to do the thing. I can't do it. So these like not, 10 billion hour people who are playing it a little bit more casually can't do the thing. I need to give them a way to do it. And so rather than like improve covert movement, rather than, like whatever that thing is, then they just give them the like mobile mini game where they can, you just click the thing and wait 3 hours.
Yep.
And then a huge focus of the gameplay loop becomes reliant on these things. And then they build 3 or 4 more mechanics into the game, a bunch more quests that rely on it. And then it's at this point, I feel like it's inexorably connected. Everything's intertwined to the point where you gotta go and do like a food run, and then the next one has to be the quest run, and then the next one has to be the money run, that you can have enough money to buy the stims and to repair your armor, so that you can go in, and then if you die, okay, start over from square one. Okay, I gotta do the money run, I gotta do the I don't know.
I mean, game design is hard though, right?
Yeah.
So like,
I'm sure it's easy. What do you mean?
I mean, especially when you're doing something different from all other games.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're just copying other games and trying to improve them, that's pretty easy, because you have a baseline that works. And here, it's just very different. So like, how do you do this in a way that's better? It's a very open-ended question. It's a very hard question. I kind of think, so you mentioned, crafting and the flea market, which both, on the one hand, I think those are necessary and useful parts of the game. I also think they both ruin the game. And I would do them very differently. I don't exactly know if what I would do would work, but like, it's just so sometimes changes in isolation wouldn't work, and they require changes elsewhere. So like, why does the flea make the game better? It's because otherwise you might be on some quest and just not ever be able to get the item,
Yeah.
like we were talking about. And sometimes it's a stupid item. Like last time I played, I needed, there's something early on where you need like 2 packets of screws. And I did so many raids and I couldn't find the second packet of screws. It
Yep.
was and I was too low level for the flea, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so there's stuff like that. Like that's kind of stupid. But again, if I knew somewhere, and I was looting things that I thought would have a high probability of screws, maybe this was wrong, but I was like on the shore, the town west of Shoreline, for example, where there's lots of like hardware spawns and whatever.
That's a good place to look for screws.
Mm-hmm.
No screws for like literally 10 hours of streaming. It was ridiculous. But okay, so the flea is one way to answer that. But the problem is, this game is about 2 things, right? Basically, it's about gunfights and looting. Right?
Yeah.
And flea market means you don't have to find things by looting, right? Which is why they then introduced found in raid. But that's kind of a hack to fix this problem that the flea market introduced, right? And so I would try to fix it a different way, right? Because found in raid is kind of weird and artificial. Like, why does this guy care where I found this thing? Right.
Yeah.
But like
Exactly.
somehow everybody magically knows there's a magical aura around the thing that tells people where you found it. Right.
I got to send you a diagram I made where it was, is the item found in raid? And it's literally a flow chart. And it's like 18 different paths where it wasn't found in raid. But it's technically found in raid. And then one path where it is found in raid. And a million things that would make it not. Did you kill the guy and take it from the other player? Nope, not found in raid.
Not found in raid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like.
That's why there's a check mark so that you know, right?
Yeah.
But like then crafting, which doesn't really take any effort, is found in raid.
Yeah.
Which doesn't,
and that
like,
was
it doesn't
directly
really,
because crafting is useless for questing unless you can craft things for quests. And because we made the quest found in raid items because of it's like you can follow it, you can see how we got there, but that doesn't make it any more enjoyable to see how we got there. It makes it less because you're like, okay, maybe I'm not a game designer, maybe I'm not smart enough to know how we fix this, but I'm a player and my input should be valuable, and this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good that I can go in raid, kill a guy, he's got the thing I need, it's not found in raid, I can't turn it in, but I can craft the thing without having to touch a raid. And then what am I supposed to do? Like,
I mean, that's the feeling you can always trust as a player, right? So like as a designer, there's certain things that I just don't listen to players about. Like when they say fix your game by doing X, right?
Yeah.
It's usually not what I want to do, but usually also it wouldn't work, right? Or when people say, why don't the devs just blah, blah, blah? And the answer to that question is usually because making games is harder than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Why don't brain surgeons just cut the tumor out? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Have you thought about just cutting it out?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've never been a brain surgeon, but it's a lot like that. It's a lot. Yeah. Imagine you had to be a brain surgeon and a lawyer at the same time and like do the court case about how you're allowed to do every specific incision. But the one thing that players absolutely know, right, is I'm either having a great time, this is great, or like I'm really not having a good time and this isn't very good. And designers really should listen to that. Unless they're anti-player designers, which is a thing, but that's, if I like, so I'm a, what some people would call a very opinionated, or maybe you could find worse words like snobby or something kind of designer, where I make a game, I have a very specific idea about what it should be. I don't really want other designers to tell me their opinion on it, right? Et cetera. But, things don't always work the way you think they're going to. And the player response is a reality check about whether it worked. And then you don't have to do what players tell you, but if the game's not working the way you thought, you should do something to address their specific concerns.
That's a really interesting point where it's like you can listen to the gut of the player, separate from the feedback of the player. Oh, this doesn't feel good, you should just do this. It's like, okay, that's stupid, and I don't even have to tell you why that's a stupid thing. But why do you feel like this is a bad thing? Why don't you feel like you're having fun? And you can, if it's separating those two things, that's a really interesting point.
But
that's why I made my video. That's why I made the video.
Yeah.
But this is also really hard when you're trying to
Yeah,
make a game again.
I can only
So
imagine.
you can go back to that Henry Ford quote, right? If I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a
A
faster,
faster
horse.
horse, yeah.
Right? And that's what designing a new game is like, is people all are asking you for the faster horse, and you're like, no, man, I'm trying to do this other thing. But doing that thing is really hard.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, like, yes, it's really hard, but also that's our freaking job.
Yeah.
We do a good job at our job. And so it's just hard. It's a hard life, but we chose it, right?
I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you've worked on a game in open development, but like, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on like how gaming as a whole seems to be shifting in this direction, where you have these games that like early access is just the sexy way of saying, I want you players playing my game and I want some of the money so that I can continue to develop the game. We've seen game developers do that in unsavory ways, and we've seen tons of games that would have never gotten made unless they were able to raise money that way. But like when I think about when I have these conversations with Twitch chat over and over and over and over, and I can't help but put myself in that position where I'm like, how do you manage that? How do you know what to make first? How do you know what to fix and what to wait to fix? Because like we're in this position where it's like there are people today, like as close to an objectively good change as I could possibly think for Tarkov, which is allowing me to move, being the control of my character better. And we have people who are like, yeah, but fix the audio, like get rid of the cheaters, get rid of this. And it's like, yeah, that might have been a bigger issue, but I don't know how game development works. I don't know how big their team is. I don't know how long they've been working on that. And it's just like, have you ever worked on a game that was open, and how do you feel about that cluster of an emotional roller coaster?
In this way that history repeats itself, my very first professional game, which started as me and another guy in a room in 1996, was an online multiplayer team-based science fiction shooter. It was like a vehicle shooter. It wasn't a dude. It would have been a better game if it was dudes running around. For exactly the reason we're talking about, because the vehicles had inertia and it was like hard to move.
Interesting.
But yeah, and so we were developing this game, and you know, we didn't have nearly as big of a player community as Tarkov. Firstly, because it was a tiny indie game, and secondly, because it was 1996, and not that like people were trying to play games over like their 2400 baud modem, right?
Oh
like that was the situation. But yeah, I mean, there's a few things, right? But the biggest ingredient is just the personality of the developer. Like again, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
What is your goal for the game? And then if you're clear about that, people aren't always clear, but if you're clear about it, that can help you answer these questions about what priority to do things in, but in combination with how hard are the things to do. So if something's not core to my vision, but it's not that hard to do and it'll help people out, I'll do it first, right?
Yeah.
But you just mentioned cheaters, right? Which has a huge impact on the game, I think. Honestly, cheaters is really hard. I have some ideas for fun stuff that I would do to deal with cheaters. So like, you know, wall hacks and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to make a shooter where sometimes I intentionally render dudes on the other side of the wall that don't really exist. And if you snap to them enough, we just like ban you, right?
Yes.
The problem is if you don't implement that correctly, legit players might see something and that would be bad. Right?
And you spend all the time implementing the thing, and then they just go and remove that particular, like they remove whatever it is that makes it so that they get caught, and then now you have a dead anti-cheat feature sitting there. And you,
okay, so
Yeah.
there's different classes of anti-cheat, right? Some anti-cheat is about looking for the anti-cheat software, right? But the thing that I'm talking about is legit, like, so one major class of wall hacks is like you hack into the shader, and you know, when a 3D game draws stuff, it draws like many layers of stuff that you can't see because it's just like it's a harder problem to cut away the things that you can't see, and it wastes all your GPU time, right? And so instead of doing that, we just draw a bunch of stuff on top of each other. And legit players can't see behind the wall, but we did draw those pixels before we drew the wall on top of it, right? And so you can hack into your graphics driver and see what's back there. But then if I can spoof that by drawing stuff that legit players can't see, but that cheaters can see, then it doesn't really matter what anti-cheat software is doing it. As long as you're using this class of wall hack, maybe I could spot you. right?
Yeah.
But again, it's like, who knows
Yeah.
how well that would work and stuff. But that's like a big thing, right? On the other hand, this patch that they just released was like, yeah, let's just like the entire announcement of all these balance tweaks was it's all numbers that you can just change. It doesn't take any new
Yeah.
programming. Right? And so that's an example of like, I think that's really great that they did that, because it's an example of we can do this thing. It's much easier than most of the things that we do, and it's responding to player concerns. So
Yeah.
let's just do it. And even if I'm sure, like, okay, either they had these balance tweaks sort of, they were thinking about them for a while, like what the values should be, or they responded very quickly in like a couple of days to the discussion, right? And if it's that latter thing, yeah, right. If it's that latter thing, then they're not even very carefully balanced. And it's like, well, this is our guess. This is our guess on what'll do better for the players, and we might have to come back later and tweak it, right? But I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great when developers have that kind of responsiveness. I think that's kind of what you buy into when you do a live game.
Yeah.
Right? Is like you're working with the audience of your game in a way that you don't if it's a single player game where you throw it over the wall at people, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I've been doing lately since that first game.
Yeah.
Something that I think, like when I approach problem solving from like my engineering background, that I've kind of, I think, deduced, and this is probably, if you go to school for like game design, it's probably like game design 102, like abstraction. This is kind of just something
bad. Don't go to game design school. But go
there you go. Just become a streamer, and then you'll know. But I after years of like struggling to figure out like what is it about this that's good and this that's bad, because the surface level things never satisfied me. So I ended up coming up with the idea of abstracting real life things, mechanics, experiences, whatever, into game mechanics. So one of the examples that I think is pertinent to the recent changes that happened, that I kind of had an epiphany on over the last couple of days, opening up some other games, was recoil. Recoil for me, it felt so bad, and I couldn't exactly pinpoint why it felt so bad. And everybody, they look and they see recoil, and they see what is there to look at. It moves a lot. You don't like it moves a lot. You want move less. And to me, that was never like, no, because I play other games that sometimes have the same magnitude, but it's different. So for example, with Modern Warfare 2, what I was playing, it had a bunch of recoil, but the fact that it went consistently up and to the right, I thought about shooting in real life. The thing you're missing when you play a game is you feel it. It's the feedback. That's like 99% of your ability to control a weapon, is that you feel it. And a small portion of it is visual. But in a video game, it's 100% visual. So how do you account for that loss? And so with CSGO, it's give it a spray pattern. With Modern Warfare 2, it seems as if, at least in my testing, that if we make it, even though there's some randomness, if we make it so that it's consistent in one direction, for example, that's the equivalent of like you go bang, 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 and you go, oh, it's going up to the right, like almost like you can feel it. Let me pull down and adjust. Let me pull down and like with Tarkov, it was up, left, up, right, left, up, down, up, left, right, and it's like I described it as it feels like you're riding a bull, not riding a bicycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had thousands of hours on OG Counter-Strike and less on the modern ones, like maybe 1,200 on CS Source and like not that many on Go. But yeah, like some of those weapons had a lot of recoil. Like the AK in Counter-Strike was like it would go straight up, but you learn how to pull it down, right? Because it's got this deterministic spray pattern, and you can get very, very good at firing the individual weapons in that game. But it has a lot of recoil, right?
Yeah.
But you can play the recoil, and that makes it that actually makes it better to have more recoil in some, I mean, up to some limit, because you're giving an opportunity for players to be good at the game.
Yeah.
Right. Here's a place for you to get better.
mastery.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a multi-dimensional game, is when there's many different sub areas and you can get better. You can even decide which ones you want to focus on and like train that or with,
Yep.
right? I always had wacky ideas. I'm not suggesting these are good ideas, but like, you know, in Counter-Strike, I think still the spray patterns are completely static. They don't change, right? Which is maybe a little bit boring. Like, how do you add more randomness while keeping it playable? And I always had this idea, like, you know, maybe on bullet 3 or something, we play a slightly different sound effect or jostle your gun in a different direction. And that determines, like, on bullet 6, which way it's going to, like, yank. So we give you time to listen and look at something. And, like, it's maybe even a little bit subliminal, but you sort of absorb how the weapon behaves and you can deal with it. But that's very different from probably what a lot of games do, even, which is just we pick a random number for every bullet and that's where it goes, right?
Because
like,
people want
very hard to play. Yeah, go ahead.
People want the realism, so they say, here's how much a gun bounces.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that determines the realism. But for me, what I think is the realism is I'm shooting and I can feel it and I can control it, and there's some amount of out of control, but also some amount of, like, if I feel it's going up, and you know, so the realism is actually your ability to intuitively control a thing even if it's hard.
Yeah.
That's more realistic than the number of pixels something bounces. It's it's the experience. And that's kind of the whole premise of my video, was that you have a vision for an experience. So if you design a game and you want a particular experience, you might be, like, you know, stubborn about how you want it. There's a world in which people don't like the way it is for whatever reason, but you've still succeeded in giving that experience. They just didn't like that experience. There's a world in which what you've given them doesn't match the experience that you wanted. And that's where I think you were saying you have to listen. Like, so that was my plea to Nikita in this case was, do you want us to feel like we're badass soldiers? Or do you want us to feel like kind of helpless, you know, struggling? Yeah.
It's a really interesting, difficult design problem, again, about how to do this, right? So the recoil is one, and the recoil is like an obvious one because a lot of games have recoil and they've treated it differently, right? And you as a player can see a bunch of that. But if you think about, like, trying to be like real life, and how do you make a game feel like in real life, the way we get better at a lot of this stuff is, like, our body learns it and we know how it feels and we react, and you just don't mostly have that, right? I mean, maybe with, like, modern, I wouldn't want to play a game like Tarkov with a gamepad, but, you know, like the new PlayStation controller has, like, better haptics, and you could start to do, like, subtle things in there that maybe translate, but that would be super experimental.
Force
like,
feedback on the mouse. Put wheels on the bottom of my mice, please.
Electric shock you through the mouse sometimes, right? But but there's opportunities for that everywhere, even in things that you think are boring. So, like, right now, when you ADS a weapon in Tarkov, it's like based on what's loaded onto the gun and what gun is it and what stat is it. But, like, how do you put player skill into that, right? So, like, in real life, I have an AR-15. It has a Vortex Viper LPVO on it. It's supposedly one of the best optics you can get for eye relief, for example, right? And even at 1x, I shoulder it. I haven't used this optic that much. I shoulder it, and it's, like, hard to find the eye relief, right?
Yeah.
And then I use it a bit, and I'm just, like, a little better at it. But I still, to this day, I would much rather shoot through a red dot than this 1x Vortex Viper, right? But I've gotten better enough at it that I'm like, okay, the more that I use this, the more I'm going to be able to snap to the thing. And you almost could wonder, how could you add more player control into, like, ADSing your weapon so that you could get better at it as a player, right?
When all you have is the mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or I don't know, like there's this dichotomy that goes way back almost to the start of video games, right? Where you have all these action arcade games that are player skill, and then you have, you know, like World of Warcraft kind of games that are all, like, character skill, right? And how much is in one category versus another, right? How much improvement is the player getting better at the game? And how
Yeah.
much improvement is number go up on your character? And
Yeah.
I think a little bit of both of those is fine, but I think video games can become deeper, more interesting, more worthwhile pursuits as something that people spend all their freaking time on when both there's more avenues for the player skill instead of number go up, and um, those are interesting. Like the activity has to be kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be, and that's the weird thing. Like why? So playing a shooter and aiming with a mouse, it's not that much like what your body does when you actually aim something in real life. But somehow it's interesting enough of an activity because it's this analog puck that you're moving around and it's got some weight to it and you can move it fast, you can move it slow, you can get your body into it. And it's got enough detail to it that it's interesting to do for a really long time. But a lot of controls in games don't have that much interest in them. And how do you find that, right? That's an interesting question. Maybe we're getting way off anything we were talking about, but it's just to say it's a hard problem.
Yeah.
Hard problem.
Yeah, I don't know if back on the anti-cheat thing, because that's something that it's almost an impossible conversation to have, because you're either in the anti-cheat business and you're not going to talk about what the hell you do, or you're a cheater who thinks or whatever. Like there's no way to communicate or to talk about it. So unless my dad's an engineer, a software engineer, has been his whole life. So I like to sit and talk with him about what would you do? You have to be an engineer that's not in the business to think about interesting ways to tackle these problems. And I know Valorant is a good example of the fact that they built the anti-cheat at the same time as their entire foundation of the game. So for example, I don't know if you saw any of the dev stuff that they did back in the day, but they won't even send the other character information to your client if they're behind a wall unless they get close-ish to the wall. These are things that people are like, well, why don't they just do what they do? Or why don't they? It's because they didn't architect the anti-cheat from the ground up with the net code at the same time.
Yeah. Or you guys know that rubber banding that's happening on streets all the time, right? Probably what that is the server is getting bogged down doing some computations, whatever they are, I don't know, right? And not running in real time.
Decryption.
Well, it's probably more like physics of something in the world or something. I don't know. Or some gameplay code that's going haywire and looping a lot. It's hard to say, but something like you're talking about, that kind of anti-cheat can be pretty effective. It doesn't eliminate cheating, but it makes cheaters inherently much less powerful in terms of detecting players on the map. And the thing is, it does require more computation on the server. So you have to be in a technically better situation. And actually, so game developers are often very talented and very skilled, especially in graphics, but man, we're just getting worse over time at networking. My first game that I worked on, like I said, it was a networked game. The server only ran at 10 ticks per second, but that was fine for 1996, right? And we did 32 players on, our servers were basically the same kind of computer you would have at home. So a 486, 60 megahertz PC, which is thousands to millions of times slower than your computer today. We did 32 players and it was fine, right? And somehow today, we do 32 players on whatever the newest computer is in 2023, and that's all you can fit on the server, and it's still slow sometimes, right? We should be able to fit tens to hundreds of thousands of players on a server, even though we're doing more. And it's just that category of programming has not stayed sharp.
No, it's building efficient and optimized code. Has us getting better at that has got it's hit the ceiling of the amount of data that we now have to send. We can send the data back and forth in very much the same ways, but it's just now we're going to send your entire stash value and your username and your email along with every player update. You know what I mean?
It's interesting.
Oh yeah, that was another thing that happened when I was playing early on. It was like every time you tried to move something in your stash, you would get like some HTML looking error
Yeah.
message. There was like a full day of that. Like
Yeah.
it was bad. But like graphics, because it's what people see immediately and people judge the game on, that just means we have to be sharp there as game developers.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we obviously don't look as good. Whereas like, networking, like it matters, but it just somehow you could sweep it under the rug a little bit. And then when you're making a game in an engine, like Tarkov is, a pre-existing engine made by another team who doesn't know that much about your game and may not even care that much about it, and
Yeah.
is now IPO'd and trying to sell their engine to like architects and film people instead of games, right? Then you're trying to use this system that's not really made that much to do what you're trying to do. And then when you try to do networking on it, you're probably using some very generic networking systems that are inherently very inefficient, but that's all like the engine gives you, right? So back
Yeah.
in the day when we were making stuff go over 2400 baud modems, like every single bit we were putting into the message that we were sending to people, and it was all very manual and very
Yeah.
very specific. And I very much doubt that that's the way any of this works for Tarkov.
No.
Yeah.
But they don't that much have a choice. It would be a huge project to change
Yeah.
that.
And
But I also, maybe that should be a priority. I don't know, man.
and that's what I think of when I go back to kind of the question I asked about like how a game being in open development, being in beta, having so many people play it, that game maybe blowing up to be bigger and more culturally relevant than you ever thought it would be, more players on it, then that brings new and a new attention from the cheating community that maybe hadn't been there before. Maybe now you want to go back and be able to network different because the networking has always been a struggle, and it feels like I would say that the vast majority of all players in Escape from Tarkov would say that the networking hasn't gotten any better over time. Maybe it has gotten better, but as it gets better, there are more demands of it, because it feels like every time there's a new map, we get to the same spot where it's like, okay, well, now we have this new map. Now this map's not optimized, and they optimize a little bit. Now we get the new map that's not optimized, and it's like, and obviously as a player, we are so far removed. I am so far removed from what is happening, what is causing rubber banding or stuttering or desync or anything like that. But no matter how good or bad the networking has gotten over the years, the player feedback has remained exactly the same, which is I die behind a wall. And I've been dying behind a wall in 2019. I'm dying behind a wall in 2023. So has the networking got better? I don't know. But my player experience sucks. And so it's like so hard. I try to factor in all these things that like, man, maybe they are dealing with networking tools that they thought would have been proficient enough, and now due to all these circumstances aren't, but going back and replacing those things when they're trying to finish this game and get it to 1.0, it's like a brain explosion. But it's frustrating because once again, you might not be able to trust the feedback of the players, just fix the game, but the feeling from the player is overwhelmingly frustrating because I'm dying behind a wall, I'm dying to desync, I'm rubber banding, and it's like that's such a hard gap to bridge, I guess.
One thing I have to say game developers are guilty of across the board is not paying enough attention to the quality of networking and things like it, right? Like earlier in games, game developers would all care about graphics, and then, well, sound, well, we could get to sound in a minute in this game, but like, classically sound effects would kind of suck and graphics would be amazing, but sound, just thinking about single player games, is such a big part of what puts you in a mood. And so eventually developers learned that sound was pretty important. And also, fortunately, it's cheap compared to graphics. So most single player games have really good sound now. High budget single player games.
Yeah.
So now we're at the place where like networking for multiplayer games is still, for some reason, like sound was to games in the 90s, where it's kind of just like playing bleeps and whatever. And you're like, no, this is the whole way that I play this game kind of doesn't feel good. And I wish more people would pay attention to it, because it's kind of ignorable by developers because it's invisible and people are still playing the game. What are you talking about? People are playing the game, but it is so important, right? So one of the things I said in those tweets is like, I kind of these days would rather watch people play Tarkov than play it myself.
Yeah.
Right? the networking is one of the reasons. The movement was frustrating, right? And honestly, the fact that the game is about just being kicked in the nuts constantly is part of it. But if it were fairer getting kicked in the nuts,
Yeah.
I'd still play sometimes, right? And the networking is part of what makes it feel unfair.
Yes.
And so yeah, but again, it's hard. And so I understand why they might be in a position where it's hard to fix. And so but I also think it's important. In fact, I think it's the second most important thing. Like the most important thing, I think, if it was my game, I would take all the programmers and say, you guys aren't doing anything else except changing the way raids work so that you drop in, drop out, just like Cycle Frontier, because that game does it perfect.
Oh my God.
We're doing that, right? And now that's not just something you can do on your own because you have a few other problems all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
So like, well, what do you do about things that get looted and how do you restore it? So you have to have some gameplay thing, but then that could be really cool. Like, oh, areas are getting irradiated or like bombarded by gas and you have to leave them for a while and then the loot respawns. And then, so everybody knows though, after that's done, that there's maybe good loot there. And now you have this tactical firefight, but it's not around a point because it's an area. So you have like a perimeter that's highly contested. Like you can design for that, right? But again, it's not a simple thing. And so it's not like, why don't the devs just do this? It's like, okay, it's hard, right? And then also you have to, you know, in the way that frame rate goes down after a while because you got memory leaks on the client, servers have that same problem. And so one reason why you maybe have a limited raid time is because we're restarting the server as soon as that raid is over to clear all the memory. And you need to fix that in order to have a longer running server. But it doesn't have to run forever. It could run like, you know, 4 hours and reset and it's drop in, drop out, right? But like after playing games like the Cycle, so going back to the point about respecting the player's time, like I actually tried, I was hyped for Streets and like I actually did a stream. It was a 2-hour long stream where
I watched it,
downloaded the update, and I was like, I was just trying to get in a raid. I tried to get in as a PMC. I tried to get in as a scav. I tried customs. I tried streets. I tried like shoreline. I could not even get into a raid. And that's a little bit different. Like, okay, that's launch day, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, and I haven't played since then, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but you know, all the time, even right now, after a lot of the excitement from the wipe is gone, it's still, I see people taking many minutes to get into a raid still when I drop in and watch the stream. And it's like, why, right? And I know why. It's because of the way things are set up. And those things are not easy to change. But I would totally prioritize that, especially like, haven't they said that their long-term goal is to make it like an open world where everything's connected, right? And so that would be like, you would almost have that at that point because you would still have separate maps, but all the maps you can drop into at any time. So when you go like, you know, from Lighthouse to Streets or whatever, you're just popping out of one and popping into the other, and you don't have to wait 10 minutes for the next server to start, right? So I mean, I'm sure that's on the priority list. Like, I don't want to, you know, but it's just hard. But again, also it's what you prioritize as well. And because so much of my experience is sitting there saying, why am I not playing the game right now? That I would prioritize that. But of course, it's, I mean, the reason we have different developers is because different developers have different opinions. And, you know, if I sat down to make a game where you loot and shoot stuff, like from first principles, and I had never seen Tarkov, I probably would end up with a game that's super different. And people may not like as much, or they may like more, right? Who knows? But I would end up in a very different place. And so it's just, as a developer, you have to find, it's like you were asking, how do you decide what the priorities are? And it's just like, it's a gut thing half the time. But also there's just realities of like, how many people play the game, how many minutes, like multiply the number of minutes people have played the game by the number of minutes people wait in queue to get into a raid by the number of raids people have played. And it's like an astronomical number of hours, right? And at some point you have to say, well, is that a good idea?
Have you only seen one of my videos? Because I swear to, I have countless videos where I'm like, here's how you can do like a quick sell feature for the flea market, or an improved loadout preset system, and I literally went through, and it was, assuming I have like 90% of the stuff I have like in cases, guns and ammo and magazines, 250 clicks.
Yeah.
And 3.5 minutes, and that's like muscle memory, double click, double, like dragging over. And then I literally mocked up everything, the preset system, and it was like, buy everything, get everything you need, exactly what you want in like 7 clicks, and you're in. Like heal, insure, all the things. And it's like, just imagine when if you have 100,000 players, not to mention that every one of those clicks is like opening up a new screen, which is a new network call because it refreshes every time, which is like, there's just so much from every angle.
Oh yeah, no, dude, I've lived through some of that. And they have, they've made some interface changes since I started, right? Like you used to go from your stash to the traders, you used to have to go out to the main menu.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't have to do that anymore and stuff. But that is a simple change. But again, like the thing to understand again is, I mean, the picture that's coming to mind is like, imagine it's a space game and you're trying to pilot some giant capital ship and like blowing up all the time, and you're trying to fix it, and like the gun's disabled and you've got to go get that working so it can fire back. And like, that's what running a game studio is like. And if the whole thing hasn't exploded yet for them, which is great. I mean, many game studios, probably the majority, go out of business in less time than they've been running Tarkov. So that's very successful by the standards of the games.
Yeah.
And so, on the one hand, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but like, it's sometimes you can't do these things because everything else is exploding all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
But on the other hand, that's our job, man. And like, if too much stuff is exploding, then you got to take a step back and be like, okay, how do we retrofit the hull so that less stuff is exploding all the time?
Which is compromises.
Yeah, well, maybe, but sometimes maybe you can come up with something good.
Yeah.
But it's just hard. But also, we decided to do this, and so it's our fault. Like, nothing that I'm saying is to excuse any developer from problems with their game.
Yeah.
It's a very like Teddy Roosevelt, the buck stops here thing, right? If I decided to make this game, then even if we don't have enough budget, even if we don't have enough people, even if we're trying to deal with a technical infrastructure and whatever, like, this whole thing was my idea, so it's my responsibility what goes well and what goes poorly ultimately. And so that's just my job, and it's my job to fix the problems. And so that's all true. But also, I got to fix the problems.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly. Like, I try to empathize with how big of a problem that is, where the entity becomes so big that like moving it forward even just inch by inch is just like, there's a problem over here, like you said with that analogy, there's this ship's down, this shield is down, there's a fire over here, there's a fire over here. And it's like, I try to empathize with that and be like, man, like, that's how do you, and sometimes I feel that way with Tarkov. How do we move this forward? The movement sucks, and the audio sucks, and the network sucks, and there's cheaters, and there's this and that, and they're trying to finish maps and mechanics so that we can actually like push this thing towards the finish line of 1.0. And it's hard. And so it's like, I try to empathize with how frustrating and how big of a thing that is, but then at the same time, sometimes, like you were saying, it's like, man, my job is just to play the game and have fun and provide feedback, and so that's what I'm trying to do,
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps a lot when the feedback is positive, intelligent engagement, which is what that video was. I was listening in before the session, so I heard you talk about how it was one of your least favorite videos to make, right? But it was coming from the right place. It wasn't trying to tear the game down, but it was saying like, look, man, I as a player invest. So, I mean, I'm paraphrasing. You didn't literally say this, but like, I as a player invest so much time and energy in this game. And that is the kind of game this is obviously trying to be. It's not a casual game. So I'm like your target player, and I'm having a really bad time because of all of these. And here's why. And let me do my best to explain to you. And that's really the best. And okay, so here's the thing. That video, I don't feel was doing a negative. So a lot of the time people will pose like that's their attitude, but really they're just kind of grandstanding and trying to show how smart they are in this internet way. And they really are trying to diss the thing, even when they're trying to pretend like they're not.
Yeah.
And that video wasn't doing that either, right? It was legit just like, let me just try to explain, lay it out. And I think that was very helpful. And of course, then it's up to a developer how much they listen. And in this case, it seems like they really did, and that's great. But for anyone else out there, right, saying stuff like the developer sucks, or Call of Duty has a higher frame rate or whatever, like those things are not helpful at all, because we know that. Usually we know when we have certain problems, or like obvious problems, I guess.
Yeah.
But like sometimes, like, okay, it's possible for a developer to know that a problem exists without appreciating the full extent of the problem, and then especially how it feels when you're on the other end. And like networking is exactly one of those, right? Because as a developer, it's possible to have a very antiseptic, like, I mean, we don't have as much budget for as many servers as we would like to run. And so we have to run, 12 instances of the game on each hardware or whatever. And then, just sometimes statistically servers get busy at the same time, and that's bad. But hopefully later, when we have more money or when we manage to optimize things, that'll be a better experience. And you're just laying all this out like tactically, right? But as a developer, you're usually not feeling that emotionally in the same way as players are. And to be honest, you kind of can't, because if we did, we wouldn't last very long. We would just become depressed, people, and die, because there's so many problems with all of our games, and nothing is ever as good as you wish it was. And all of that. And so we actually, it's sort of like, if you've heard these recordings of like Chuck Yeager flying these experimental aircraft that are about to explode at any second, and he's just like got the coolest, like, Roger, control, let me bring this down before the temperature goes up anymore, or whatever the hell he says, right? You kind of have to have that to be a successful game developer. But the problem with that is that does insulate you from the players, because the players are playing the game to have an experience. They're not playing the game to be like separated out from it. And so it's a developer talent on the one hand to connect back to what are players experiencing without feeling it all the time, especially when it's problems. But then also it's very useful, I do think, for players to communicate that, especially when things aren't working, right? Because the other thing about developers, I mean, as many hours as you guys play the game, like the developers have been living with this game for even more hours, right? And they're just even more used to everything about it, and jaded about it in some sense, right? And maybe not jaded in a bad way, but just like in the way
the last thing you want to do is play the game that you look at 8 hours a day when you're coding, and like very often at least
8 hours. I mean, for Nikita and whoever else is in charge of that game, it's very easy for it to be like my life as I think about this game. Right. And I do fun things occasionally 1 or 2 days a week for an hour. I don't know if that's what he does, but like somebody who leads a game project, it is very common. Like that's what my life is like right now, right? I do about 3 hours of fun stuff a week, maybe a little bit more, and then I'm just being a game developer. But that's my choice, right? So I'm not singing a sad song there. But it's just to say that when it's so many hours for so many years, that just leads to certain consequences. Like things aren't fresh for us, right? And they're not exactly fresh for you either, but you're trying to play the game, whereas the developer isn't really trying to play the game in the same way, right? And it's just a different experience, and reconnecting that is very valuable. And that's what I thought was good about that video. It was like, and it was also because you were connecting it to a point in the past of the game that actually existed, I think was also extra valuable. Because it was like, what I'm saying isn't impossible. It was like there. And we're not saying rewind the clock to that exact thing, but that nature, that feeling, let's get back to that feeling while having all the sophistication that's been added on since then. I think that's a valuable message for a developer to hear.
And
I hope they felt that way too. I could also feel like, because it's so hard to do this stuff. I could also feel like they're just like, oh my God, leave me alone. Let's put this stuff
100%.
out so that they leave us alone, right?
I literally, the last message I sent to Nikita was, I'm sorry, I know I can be a pain in the ass, but I appreciate you. And he was like, no, like, it's okay, like, no problem. Like, because I know what it's like to write software, spend all this time doing something, have 27 bug reports come in, 24 of them are user error. And like, so even strategically speaking, like you were talking about, don't just say, fix your game, it sucks. As a community, every time you do that, you've literally watered, like you've made Nikita care about everyone's opinion less. Because it's like, I don't want to hear, if I hear game sucks, game sucks, game sucks, game sucks. Hey, here's some feedback about your game. That gets lost in the shuffle that might be super genuine and useful information.
Yeah, it's like in the same way that you have to like kind of ignore YouTube comments or Twitter comments if you have a lot of followers, because it is all this like easy negative stuff, right? You can't, if that's the constant stream of player feedback, you just simply can't listen to it and do a good job anymore, because it would make you
notes here.
Yeah. No, it's like imagine if like Twitch chat was all you ever heard as you walk down the street every day, right? And it's just like, I'm sure Twitch chat right now, I'm not watching it, but I'm sure it's amazing, right?
I've got it in sub only mode, so.
Yeah. I mean, or like YouTube comments.
Yeah.
If YouTube comments, if the quality of non-subscriber YouTube comments, and I think they're even better than they were a few years ago, but like if that was all you heard every day in your waking life, you would go insane.
Yes.
Or you would become a hermit and isolate yourself from everybody. And that's the problem is, so as a game developer, you want to care about what the players think, but it's hard to have a high quality connection, again, because the internet is all about low quality, quick, negative comments usually. And you just can't listen to too much of that, or it'll make you will think, right? That's actually a small percentage of the players who are being very vocal and negative, but you come to picture that as the players, and then you don't like the players anymore. And as soon as you don't like your players, you're done as a developer, as far as I'm concerned.
Damn. Yeah.
You're just honestly, like, we don't have to get into this, but you're describing like my experience, because I started streaming, and when you start and you only have 3 or 4 people, you can have these great, interesting discussions. And as I've gotten more successful, the quality has just been watered down and watered down. And you can actually say this about the Tarkov community as a whole. It's gotten more successful, so it's just gotten watered down and watered down to the point where it's like, I'm getting a little bit closer every day, therapy and all that, and figuring out like, if I'm streaming for 14 hours a day, 6 days a week to 1,000 people where, it's like a disproportionate amount of just noise. Yeah. You can't separate the signal from the noise. And then, I mean,
and I think that's a really important distinction too, where like, you not only can you not separate the signal from the noise, you start thinking that the signal is the noise. You start resenting your own players. And yeah, you said that analogy through the game design of like, you start resenting your own players and that you're basically dead in the water. I immediately thought the same way, where like, I can start to resent my own viewers on my YouTube comments. I can start to resent my own people in Twitch chat chatting. And it's like, what? That's an easy way to kill whatever it is the career is, game development, YouTuber, Twitch streamer. When you start to not be able to hear the noise, but actually think, or not be able to hear the signal, but actually think the signal is the noise at one point. And then that's just like not good.
Yeah. And that's the thing that we have to figure out about the internet, right? Because the truth is that's not your audience, right?
Yeah.
Really, but it's a distorted view of your audience that if that's all you feel when you interact with them, it almost might as well be who your audience truly is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or like what you get to experience. And so, but a lot of that is just the way, it's the kind of thing that the internet encourages, the way that it distorts communication, and we just have to figure that out.
Because it's like an amplification. How do you... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's kind of an amplification of human nature, right? Like it's how it's always been. Like, right? Like, how many times have I been in line at Starbucks and said the words like, "You did a really good job, thank you." But it's so much easier to be like, "Yo, you're being really rude. Can I speak to a manager?" or something like that, or even not say anything, but to text my friend. How many times have I texted my friend, yo, the dude at Starbucks was super nice. Never. But I'll be like, yo, this person was being super rude. And so like that's always how it's been 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So it's like what we did with the internet is we turned that to 11. And we just completely amplified that to an extent where it's like instead of having one of those interactions a day as a YouTuber, if I post a new video and get 1,000 comments because 100,000 people saw my video, well, 900 of those comments are the guy who just said, well, I didn't like this thing about your video. And so it's like, it isn't the internet, it's us. It's always been us. It's always been how we value negativity over positivity. But it's like, but the internet amplified that so much. And how do you exist in it? How do you make a living off the internet?
That's what I want to know.
Well, I was just going to say, most of what people type into a comment, they would not say to your face.
Ever,
right?
yeah.
Like, that's just true. And so how do we deal with that?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like what I want to know, and this is something that I struggle with, and I'd be curious to know, like as a game developer, how you deal with the idea that there's genuine good feedback, there's complete trash feedback, and then there's just misinformed, uninformed, kind of well-intentioned but crap feedback. And separating out the two in a way that so here's how like my brain works. If someone comes in and they say it's really hard to tell if it's good or if it's that like mediocre or even if it's negative. Because let's say you're doing the wrong thing. Let's say when you were making The Witness, your puzzles sucked. Do you accept the feedback of the people that are saying it sucks because they're like frustrated or whatever? Or do you know the confidence that like you made a great game? So you have the confidence to say like, no, I know your feedback. I'm not going to listen to it. It's not worth listening to. Like, how do you juggle that to where you're not totally egotistical and totally closed to actually like growing, you know?
This is where personality types come in, right? So back when I was a teenager or whatever, or, you know, in college and after college, I maybe today would have been one of the people we're just talking about, where I'm typing negative stuff in the chat and all these things. I mean, we didn't have Twitch back then, but I did send. I was on a mailing list for like Doom editing, right? Back when Doom and Doom 2 were new, and like I was going to make a little editor. I never finished it, but there was a little mailing list that John Romero started, and I was on there because part of the source code was available, and I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, this is so lazy. They should have like used the hash table here or whatever. Like I was totally trash talking like the best game programmers in the world who had just made the most successful game in the world, right? And I actually was not even good enough of a programmer at that point to understand why what they did was better than what I was saying, right? But that was like my personality type. And the thing is, we just talked about the negative aspect of that personality type, how it sucks to deal with it all the time. And it's ignorant when you're young, right? But if you're smart and you're evidence-based and you don't just be contrarian for the hell of it or whatever, but like you learn over time when it really does make sense to be contrarian and when like being reflexively disagreeing is wrong a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
And so you learn that, and then, but that's actually a very valuable skill if you go into something like game development, because the thing is, okay, I have a picture for what games I want to make, and like I said, it starts out in the imagination and you don't have a game yet. And then you start building the game and like it doesn't match and you're sad. That's 100% of the time. And then you have to make it better. But first you have to realize that the thing that you're making is not as good as the thing you wanted to make, which some people never even get there. Some people are so in love with the fact that they're making a thing and it's their baby that they never can see the extent to which it's not that good. Right.
Yeah.
And so that critical voice, instead of applying it to other people's stuff, if you apply it to your own stuff, it's very, very valuable. And then, you know, if I get some feedback from people, I'm not a big feedback guy, to be fair, which is like why I shouldn't say stuff about other people's games. But, you know, what you were just saying a minute ago about like, yeah, but that's not what I'm trying to do, or I have confidence that these things are good. The reason I had confidence that things are good is not just because like It's not like I went on some, dating advice YouTube and they said girls like it when you're confident. So I decided to be confident and now I'm
Yeah.
magically confident. That doesn't actually work, right? Like,
You had
where
the
does confidence come
experience.
from? It's because you know. It's because you know. And so
Yeah.
the reason I know the puzzles are good is because I worked on like 3 times as many puzzles as actually got shipped in the game. And I saw what was not good about all these other ones. And I worked on the thing for like 6 years, literally,
That's
trying to
crazy.
make the puzzles as good as I could, right? And so when I say this puzzle's good, I could tell you why relative to some other puzzle it's better, and why this thing didn't work, and why I started with this idea and ended up with this idea. I like took that journey, and it was a hard journey, but the reason I stayed on it rather than shipping, like, I don't know if I've said this publicly, but the way I think about The Witness, right, is that it's sort of, for most game franchises, that would be like game number 3 in the series or whatever. And the thing is, we just built game number 1 and 2 and we never shipped it because I wanted an amazing experience for people. And I sort of did game 1, it wasn't that good. I revised it, I did game 2, it wasn't that okay. Now we've got something, and we ship it. And that's where the confidence comes from, that I believe my decisions are right. Now, objectively speaking, who knows, right? I could still be a little bit wrong or something, but like, I earned it within myself, right? So this highly critical voice that I had, that still does, I'm a little bit of an outspoken person sometimes when I don't like things still. But usually I focus that on my own stuff, right? Both technically and design wise. And it's just that's the motor that moves your boat, that gets you somewhere good. And if you don't have that, maybe you're not going to be that good. If you didn't have any internal criticism and you just said, I'm going to be a streamer, or I'm going to make a game or whatever, and I'm just going to modify what I do based on what people say, and I'm never going to have my own opinion about it. I don't know. Mr. Beast says that's what he does. But
I think that's the more common thing. I feel like
well, that's what I was about to say. But like, that's kind of like design by committee. And so games that do that get stuck in a rut, right? So like Call of Duty is kind of doing that. And
Yeah.
Call of Duty is fine if you like Call of Duty and if you want another Call of Duty, but it's not about to be fresh and new and interesting in a different way, right? It's just been the similar thing for so many games. And that's where you end up when you do that, is you land on something, and maybe there's a lot of money to be made there for a while, but I don't think it's creatively fulfilling, and it's not going to like revolutionize games or be the next amazing
And I feel
thing.
like
You have to have your own opinion.
And I feel like that is Call of Duty's biggest struggle right now, is because like they can't do, well, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have sent a faster horse, but I built this, because it is so designed by committee that like I haven't played Call of Duty in a really long time, and I got into Modern Warfare 2 a little bit because I really liked the movement and the recoil. Like, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. But like, you can like just go through the history of people's Twitter threads and like literally, like, to paraphrase, I hate slide canceling. I hate this. I hate that. Change it, change it, change it. And they change it, and it's, this game sucks. There's no movement. Bring back slide canceling. It was the only thing that added skill. And that is truly a display of the customer wanting a faster horse and expecting a car. It's, I want something fresh, but you've designed this game around what I want for so long. We're in a cycle of, I want change, but all change is bad. And they feel so stuck in that loop right now. And they tried to go a little crazy. And I feel like they're trying to crack at the shell with DMZ and be like, well, maybe if we just make a new game, then the expectations will be changed. So let's do that. But man, you feel that they gave people exactly what they wanted and are being crucified for it.
Well, there's this problem that you guys were mentioning before I came on, which is, again, or maybe after, I don't know, I've lost all track of time at this point, but the people who have something, the people who have a complaint are much more likely to be vocal, right?
Yeah.
The people who are cool with it are cool with it.
Yeah.
And
They're enjoying it.
It takes energy to do this, even if it's a throwaway, stupid comment. And
Yeah.
you won't get that most of the time from people who are cool with it. And so it's actually very difficult to like listen to what people are saying. And even before deciding what you're going to do, there's this step of like, okay, what do players actually think based on what
Yeah.
is being said? And that's almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like Call of Duty, I almost feel like a game like that, the job of that game at this point is to be that game. And if you want to
Yeah.
do something new, you got to be a new game.
I
So
agree.
Tarkov's a new game, right? And even though Tarkov is like still in beta or whatever, I think it still says beta.
Yeah.
Like how many Tarkov genre things came out in the past couple years?
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
a lot, because people see the promise and the potential of the idea, right? And like honestly, anytime you make a genre of game, that's an amazing contribution to the history of games. Very few people get to design a thing that becomes a genre of game.
Yeah.
And so the fact that that has happened here is great, right? Success, right?
Yeah.
That said, I would like it if I could move better, but
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it's good success, and you got to keep that in mind. So
For
like
sure.
when you complain about Tarkov, you also got to keep in mind that it could have been like, think of any 1,000 indie games
Yeah.
that like announce their big plans, and you play them and you're like, oh, this is going to be way interesting later after they do all this stuff, and then they never do all this stuff.
Yep.
It dies. Right? That's almost every game.
Yep.
Yeah, you're talking about, when getting the confidence and the experience to know, just like, nah, these puzzles are good because I know these 97 things, whatever. One of the best examples was last year sometime after they had introduced Steam Audio. And I don't know if you had played Tarkov before they implemented or added Steam Audio, and then during Steam Audio, and then now.
I haven't played it now, but the first two, yeah.
Yeah, so for like 9 billion reasons, I knew that just turning that binaural audio switch on for most people, unless, some of the weird HRTF head shape things, there are, a small number of people where it just like doesn't work. I had to convince the entire community. They were all saying, all the streamers were saying, turn it off, don't use it, it's bad. And it got to the point where I had to say, all right, I'm going to play you 100 sounds with no visuals. Which one's in front, which one's behind, and got tens of thousands of people to like fill out a survey. And it was like 98% get it correct with binaural on, and it's 50-50 with front and back and above. They can't tell. And then everybody switched over to being like, Steam Audio's so great. Then they remove it after I spend 6 months saying, guys, they added this thing, use it. Everybody complained, they remove it, and now they have Oculus Audio, and everybody's saying, man, Steam Audio was so great, we want it back. Well, of course you wanted it back, and now it's terrible.
The problem again is there's several layers of thing, and the thing that's broken. So the whole spatialized audio is often what it's called, of just like, if you close your eyes and you run some program that moves a sound source around your head, can you tell where it is, right?
Yeah.
That's like one very specific thing. But then there's a whole other layer of thing, which is like, I'm in a building, and is the guy, upstairs or downstairs? That's not just the direction of the sound exactly, right? It's like, is the sound muffled by intervening surfaces and all that? And that's not really, the problem is you can't get that by plugging into some sound backend. The sound backend can do that other part, the positioning.
Yeah.
But like, you have to feed it source data that tells it the geometry of your level. Like, so again, going back to the 90s, AMD actually, I forget what it was called, but they were trying to do this initiative of like bouncing rays around a simplified version of the environments. You could do like a much more accurate version of the thing. And it didn't fly back then because people just didn't care enough about audio to try and do that, or maybe it didn't work well enough because CPUs were a lot slower back then, right? Now the problem is just, think about all the effort it is to set up Tarkov maps already, right?
Yeah.
And you still
most
have
complex
problems.
maps of any game.
It's insane, and you still end up with problems in obvious places. So like, I was watching people play Streets, and there's that one like balcony right in front of whatever important locked door, and there's some sheet hanging there that like disappears and reappears when you move your head slightly, right? Like there's glaring errors like that, and that's just because it's hard to do all this
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine, so now there's already, in addition to the visuals, there's already invisible stuff that has to be managed, which you already probably have a lot of complaints with, which is just like, what do you collide with and what don't you? What is like a cosmetic object on the ground that's not going to change your elevation as you run over it and is not going to like stop you if you hit it at an angle, or what is, right? And that in most modern games, for the most part, is modeled separately. Sometimes if it's big stuff like walls, it could sort of be the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they do it in Tarkov, but for most games, it's like there's this whole set of invisible existence of the level. That's what you collide with.
Yep.
And because that's invisible, it's like maybe if you make a mistake there, it's harder to catch because most of your playtime,
Yeah.
you know, if you don't, you could have an invisible collision volume that's like a wall just floating in space somewhere, and 99.99% of playtime, nobody collides with that. And then 1 second they do, but maybe they were looking away and didn't notice, right? Like things like that could happen. So imagine you have another one of those, but it's about what is the simplified environment that like sound waves bounce off, because that's different from collision. It's kind of related to collision, and honestly, I would try to start with the collision data and then use it. But like collision data could have gaps in it that's actually bad for audio. Right?
Yep.
Audio has to be much more hermetically sealed, and the problem with audio is when there's a mistake, how do you really? It's like in networking, like. What if sometimes 5% of your packets take an extra 30 milliseconds? Like
You'll
it's
never
kind of
know.
hard to notice. Unless you have very strict debugging on that, you're not going to notice. But it could be a bad bug, right? And so audio is similar, right? And so there's that whole layer. It's a very high effort thing, but I think ever since we had this wave of BRs, starting with, I don't know, PUBG or whatever, before PUBG years ago, it became very clear that in these multiplayer games, you care about footsteps, you care about gun sound, right? And like a big dimension of player skill is those things. And so you just got to prioritize that. And it's hard. Like I said, it's hard, but you have to do a good job of it. Right?
You got to, you'll just have to go and watch my 3-hour documentary that I made on audio. Literally the title of the video is why it's basically like Tarkov audio and why you're wrong about everything. And it's all about why it's hard. It's all about the challenges. And what I did was exactly what you're talking about, which is you would never know unless you do a very specific set of things. So with the new audio system, this Oculus audio, right? There's this binaural audio checkbox. So I had spent like 9 months telling everybody with Steam Audio to turn it on. And then this new system came out with the same checkbox. And everybody was split. Some people were saying, put it on, it changes everything. Some people were saying, turn it off, it changes everything. Some were saying there's frame rate issues, whatever. I went in and I know, especially from when I worked on this video, how impossible it is. So think about this. You hear some sounds, you have to check a checkbox and it says restart the game to have your settings. So then you leave the game, 2, 5, 7, 10 minutes goes by, you open up a new map with new sounds and you go, it sounds different. I instantly know you are not ever going to compare apples to apples, ever. So that's why I went and I made another test where I said, here's every single thing. You tell me if it sounds different, if it sounds the same, and the graphs like don't lie, where I discovered that binaural audio, the checkbox, it does nothing.
Currently.
The first question, whether it's bugged or they just didn't plug it in properly or, you know, whatever. The first question I asked was, what's different, A or B? And then I played them the same sound. And 60% of the people said no difference. The rest said A, the rest said B. And then the next one, I played them with binaural on and binaural off, and I said, what's different? And it was 60% said, you know, and then I snuck in some Steam Audio ones from a year ago, and it was 98% said behind, and they got it correct, whereas everyone else was 50-50, you know?
Yep.
But how could you ever know if you're a player what's good or what's not? And then people also said, well, how did this get through testing? Well, honestly, it's because the testers are exactly in the same position as you, in that unless you're like a scientific method engineer nerd like me, I don't know who would go through the logic to think that way You know, I don't know. It's like almost impossible to expect it to ever actually work right.
Yeah, I mean, having to restart between
Yeah.
like that makes it very hard to work on something, right? But also, I would pick one thing and just try to make that one thing good rather than give people options, you know, because it's so difficult. Like people are classically very fooled by sound, right? To the
Yeah.
point. Well, also, I mean, this is a totally different topic, but like you can pretend to tweak game balance on guns, but actually just change the sound effect, and people will be like, "Oh, this gun is way better now," right?
Yeah.
But you just put some bass boost into the sounds, right? Um, but it's very hard. It's bugs can be very hard to catch, and there's no when pixels are wrong, you can just sit there and stare for 30 seconds that the pixels are wrong, and sound is so
Yeah.
transient, right? But also, so there's that problem. There's the problem that they're working with an engine they didn't write, and I don't know what constraints that puts on it, right? That said, I wouldn't try using any of this stuff. I would just write a mixer, because that's what I did in The Witness. Is I wrote a mixer by hand, right? That took some of the time of 6 years. And in that game, it's a single player game. It's way less important to localize sounds than it is in a multiplayer game, right?
Yep.
Because you'll die if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
But still, like I wanted the spatial sound to be good, and I think it's pretty good. But what I was shocked to learn, at least insofar as I could figure it out, is like there's not really a right answer anyway. So if I'm like, look, I can sit down, I could program anything. What am I supposed to do when there's some speakers or some headphones and a sound is in a certain position? What is mathematically the right answer for some simplified model? Because actually the right answer is do a perfect physical simulation of
Yeah.
an exact replica of the environment, but you can't do that. And so
For that person and their ears and their
yeah. But even something simple like I'm in a void in space with a sound around me and I've got like 4 speakers. What is the right answer? And it's like there's actually not a right answer. Actually, people just kind of do stuff, and people have different opinions in the pro audio world about what, because like, okay, so like a sound's over here. I've just got headphones, right? It's directly left. How much of it should I hear in my right ear?
Yeah.
The answer's not zero.
Yep.
It's not zero, right? And so, like, how much? And so there, you just kind of pick some number, and maybe it goes between that and 100% as you go this way or something. But now, okay, now there's 4 speakers, right? Now there's 8. Like, how do you figure it out? And it's just like arbitrary, and it's an art trying to make these things good. But again, that's our job, though, right?
But also, don't
we
forget
have to do it.
don't forget that you're pumping your sound through someone who might have Dolby Atmos and Windows Sonic through their 7.1 magical processing. That's exactly what I found. These are the reasons why my video is 3 hours long.
Yeah.
I found out thousands of people were ruining their own audio experience completely by turning other software on, and they turned it off, and it was like colorblind could see colors.
Yep.
Again.
Yeah, or these days you go to Best Buy and you get a flat screen TV that's mounted on the wall, and the speakers are on the back.
Yeah.
So they feed sound into the wall, and then it bounces off, and everything sounds like this. Or like there's computer monitors that have speakers built in that are effectively doing the same thing, but just not quite as bad because there's a few inches.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it is hard to deal with, but I mean, again, that's our job. But yeah, like so for the difficult, because I know one of the things that people are having with this wipe is just like, it sounds like there's no spatial separation between floors on a building. I can't tell if someone's upstairs, downstairs. Part of that is this thing about, okay, well, there's like a smooth brain part that I wish this game would do. And then there's a complicated part that's about, like what I said, imagine there's a whole other map that's an invisible version of the map you're on, and it has to be correct for the sound to move correctly, right? Like, because that's what you have to do.
All of the occlusion of all of the important geometries.
Yeah, in some sense, it's a little easier because it doesn't have all the visual detail and all that, but for that reason, you have fewer people working on it, and anywhere there's a crack, sound is going to come through, if you even have a system that could handle that, right? But something PUBG did, because they didn't have super intense programmers on this. They had this very simple hack where it's like footsteps from upstairs play a different sound effect. We ran some processing on the sound effect, and it's just different. Upstairs is a different effect, downstairs is a different effect, and that works very well in that game. It's not like spatialized audio in a high-tech way,
Interesting.
but there's just like not a question in PUBG. As bad as PUBG is technically, and it's really bad still in a lot of ways. That was a design, it's more of a design approach to the problem.
Yeah.
And it helps. Like it's unambiguous that there's somebody in the attic above you in that game.
But that's learned though, right? I think that's the only downside to that is it's something that's learned where if you take someone and sit them down and play them the sound the first time ever without ever knowing, they never were able to hear the sound and do the learning, the connection.
Yeah.
Then you don't know. Tarkov used to actually do that. They used to do different EQ for above versus below, and that arbitrariness mixed with the fact that the complexity of the maps, the way they are, there was never any repetition. You'd never experienced the same thing twice, so you could never learn. And it was really hard.
Yeah.
So when I did the Steam Audio stuff, I literally learned some of the basics of Unity, learned how HRTF works, and I made a 3D environment. And I mean, literally to get the localized sound, it was check a box. And it's like you play a sound and you get perfect local, well, not perfect, but if you close your eyes and show it to 100 people and play them a sound, 96 of them will say that's above, that's below, that's to the left, that's to the right. And like the video proves it. And then the other aspect that they never put in, because what Tarkov has historically had was they manually built all the occlusion themselves. So some of the issues there when you're just kind of going with the best you can, the compromise is you look at like a 3-story staircase, like in Factory, it's 3 boxes. So even though you're at the top of the stairwell looking down, it sounds like they're a million miles away. It's completely muffled footsteps. So that when you're on the top stairs, a little bit back, all of a sudden, step, 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 bang, you're dead.
Yeah.
Because you heard nothing coming up because it was like 6 occlusion layers in between.
Yeah.
But with that's kind of when you need the sound bouncing sideways to the environment and back, right?
Which is exactly what Steam Audio, and that's what Steam Audio did, or they never implemented
Could have done
that additional part. But the way that you do that is you basically go and you say, this geometry here is wood. This geometry here is concrete. And it definitely can be taxing. And I think that was one of the biggest issues is I think they ran into performance stuff. But you'd be surprised how amazing it is. And I did the demo where you hear a sound, and they even had like the floating orb, had like the 3-minute scav yelling from like the movie, the hilarious thing where he's just screaming. And it was like walk up the stairwell and you hear it. You no longer can pinpoint where it is once you go up one flight of stairs. It's just all around you.
Yeah.
But it was really natural and everything. And I think they'll be able to do the same thing with Oculus. It's just awkward.
I mean, the good news is all this stuff is fixable. The bad news is it's hard and tweaky, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing you were talking about the simple HRTF demo, right? You might be tempted to think, well, how hard could it be to at least get the direction right? Like maybe the materials are hard, but look, I can just run this demo where the direction is perfect. The thing to keep in mind there is if you do this sound bouncing around you, like imagine you're in a fight with a dude and he's in some room, it's a concrete room or something, and the door's open, right? And there's a wall between you and him, and there's like 4 or 5 feet on the wall, right? And so if he makes sounds in there that you care a lot about, what direction should they come from, right? In real life, you're not going to hear very much through that concrete. You might hear a very, very, very low pass filter version of things, but it also takes longer, right? The faster full frequency thing is going to bounce through the doorway.
Down the hallway.
So the direction, but the predominant direction that you will hear it from is not the exact geometric direction where the guy is. It's through the doorway that you're hearing it through, right? And so now, as soon as you have mistakes in the map where like sound is leaking through here or whatever, the direction could be totally wrong. Or you could be on the other side of a wall. Imagine the reflection through the doorway didn't work for some reason because you didn't cast enough rays, but a leak through the ceiling did work and it bounced over the wall but didn't bounce through. Totally wrong direction.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like that's just the kind of stuff that could happen when this isn't perfect, right?
And you ask anyone and you say, what should it sound like? unless you have been in a room and have heard an AK shoot from down the hall, like
Yeah.
nobody knows the right answer, right? You kind of have to just say like, I think it sounds okay. But when sometimes people don't have, you know, the most amazing judgment in terms of whatever, then you just end up with things that are ambiguous. Some people are like, I think it's good. Some people are like, it's god awful. And you know, who knows?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep.
Are we we've been going for 2 hours.
No, I think I don't want to take up you know, any more of your time. This was like unbelievable. Like I can already tell from the comments and everything that, this is like one of the coolest conversations we have ever had, and the ability to like get so much wisdom from someone who actually knows, not just someone pretending to maybe have recently learned, you know, like is
That's the internet,
amazing.
man. What are you talking about? No, thanks for the kind comments, and you guys are great hosts, and thanks for having me on, and good luck with the game.
Thank you.
Good luck getting kicked in the nuts over and over.
And over.
Let us know if you want to come and get kicked in the nuts with us
together. Yeah. No, seriously. Thank you so much for your time, and just like, it's just crazy how it all connected, and the fact that you even came across V's video and that you've played Tarkov and were interested enough in it. And so it's been awesome. So thank you for your time.
I mean, the last thing I would like to say before, just so it's on the record, right? It's the internet. Someone's going to find like one sentence that I said that sounds super negative about Tarkov, and they're going to clip it and put it on YouTube along with like a Soldier Boy clip or something, because that's something people like to do with me. I mean, my honest opinion about the game is like, you know, there's a lot of games I don't respect that much, and I'll say so very clearly. Like, I tried playing Battlefield 2042 last year, and it was terrible, right? And I don't think there's much excuse for how bad it was.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a badly run game project. That doesn't mean the particular people on the line, but like the management and all that was terrible, right? And but Tarkov is like one of these few games. Like, I follow it. I still like. I don't know what year I first played it. Was it 2019, 2018, something like that? Probably 2019. But I'm still following it 4 years later, which how many games? And I would like to play it. I tried to play it a couple weeks ago, right? And I really respect that they're trying something new. They're doing something very hard. They're not trying something new that's like kind of easy or medium. It's like, we're going to have a whole world scale shopping mall with all the shops 1-to-1, right? Or, you know, we're going to have a whole, you know, like people just don't try that anymore, because honestly, game development is so hard. It's very difficult to try to find people who do things that are ambitious that way. And so I really respect that. I really respect that their design is very different. There's not that many, like I got into, well, I've been in games for a long time, but I got in as sort of the indie designer who was doing different stuff. And there was this big explosion of indie games, but now most of them aren't doing things that are that different. Most of them are kind of like trying to be AAA on a low budget, right? And Tarkov is like, it's trying to be its own thing, and that's super cool. And like, I hope they continue that, and I hope the game keeps getting better. And as soon as I'm back home, I'll try playing it when I'm on a real gaming machine. Laptop I'm on right now.
Amen.
But
good luck.
Thank you for having me. And, see ya.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
Bye.